It's killed 5 people.
Don't go into the attic.
To see them die.
Hi, I'm going to Camp Crystal Lake.
Going to Camp Blood, ain't you? You'll never come back again. It's got a death curse.
What is going on? They're all dead. They're all dead. How are you?
Well, I'm Mrs. Voorhees, an old friend of the Christies. Steve should never have opened this place again. There's been too much trouble here. His name was Jason. You let him drown. You never paid any attention. Look what you did to him. Look what you did to him.
Killer.
You're all doomed.
Hi, this is Adrienne King, Alice from Friday the 13th, and the Hysteria continues.
Yes, welcome back to the Hysteria Continues, episode number 31, and this time we handle one of the biggest slasher movies of all time, and that's Friday the 13th from 1980. We've got a mega show lined up, and we're going to be talking, we're very excited, we have an interview with the final girl, Alice herself, Adrienne King. That's going to be coming up a little bit later. But before we do that, I say welcome to my fellow podcasters who weren't paying attention. They were making love whilst that young boy drowned. So what have you got to say for yourself, Erik?
Does Mary Ann kiss as good as I do?
I don't know. You have to ask her. But and yes, and overseas we have from Tennessee, Joseph. What have you got to say for yourself?
Well, I was making love with Erik, but he's not any good.
Hey.
I'm kidding. You're
Must
great.
have a very long appendage, Joseph. You can make love with Erik from the other side of the
It
planet.
is. Yeah.
We won't go into that. How about you, Nathan? What have you been up to?
Nothing.
No. Okay. So you weren't making love while that young boy drowned?
No. I'm still a virgin.
Okay. Well, that should stand you in very good stead at.
Yeah, I think the rest of us are doomed. We're all doomed.
We're all doomed. So
We've got a death curse.
Exactly. This show has a death curse, and knowing Skype as we do, that is probably a very legitimate concern. But hopefully we shall get through this show without too many dropouts and mangled voices and various things like that. But yes, we're going to be talking about Friday the 13th. Erik's going to be introducing that a little bit later. And we're also going to be doing top 3 Friday the 13th moments from other Friday the 13th films, so not from the first one. We're going to be talking about the first one in some detail. But before we do that, we're going to get on to what we usually do, and we're going to talk quite briefly, because it's going to be a long show, because the interview with Adrienne King's like 3/4 of an hour, so we're very, very lucky to speak to her, and she was very gracious to give us so much of her time, and so that's something definitely worth sticking around for. But recently seen, Erik, what have you been watching the last couple of weeks?
Okay, well, I got drunk one night and ordered a lot of DVDs on Amazon. The stuff that I really had no interest in, but I still managed to purchase. Damn you, Demon Alcohol. But a couple of them that I saw Laid to Rest, which was a slasher film that I'd heard really bad things about, but it was going for £3 on the internet, so I bought it. And it turned out to be slightly better than I'd expected. Well, actually a lot better than I expected, but still a very, very average film. I think the killer in it has a great look with the chrome skull mask, and there's some really, really inventive gory killings going on in there, but in between the action, it's very plodding. And it has this main plot strand of a main character who has amnesia that I feel goes nowhere, and it is sort of written off in a really throwaway manner in the final few minutes. But I still thought, it was definitely worth the €3 I invested in it. I don't know, have you seen Laid to Rest, Justin?
Yes, not for a while. I remember it being very, very violent, as in explicitly gory. Yeah, I remember quite liking it. I haven't seen... There's a sequel out now, isn't there?
Yes,
Laid to Rest
called
2.
Chrome Skull, Laid to Rest 2.
Yes, which I've not seen. I think that's out. How about you, Joseph, Nathan? Is that one you've watched, either of those?
I didn't care for it. The lead girl was extremely, very whiny, and it kind of... You know how Erik has that complaint with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre where it's really shrill? I felt that way about Laid to Rest.
What about you, Nathan?
I mean, I wasn't really a fan of either one of those movies. I mean, I don't dislike them. I just think they're just kind of meh.
But you've seen the sequel, have you?
I'm sorry?
So you've seen the sequel, Laid to Rest 2?
Yeah, the sequel, I like the first one's better than the second one.
Okay, all right. Well, I suppose it's got sequelitis, but I haven't seen the sequel, so... but yeah, okay. Well, thanks, Erik. Anything else?
Oh, yeah, I bought Insidious as well on DVD because it was, again, going cheap. I mean, I saw this one in the cinema, and I was really impressed with the first half, but really depressed by the second half when I saw it in the cinema. I thought it stood up better on a second viewing. I really think the first half has some really strong moments, some really creepy moments, like where the mother sees the figure standing beside the crib and the shot of the sort of the shadowy demon in the corner of the bedroom pointing at the boy in the bed. When the ghost-busting team arrive on the scene, I feel it kind of falls apart. I was more forgiving of it second time around. So I think it's half of a brilliant film and half of a sort of half decent film.
Yeah, no, I would agree actually because I really liked Insidious, but they didn't have the budget to pull off what they wanted the second half. But then, to be honest, it would I would have been more than happy for it to carry on that kind of creepy, low key kind of way. But to be honest, I think is it James Wan and all of those films that the films he's made. Was it Dead Silence he made as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, I liked Dead Silence, I have to say. Yeah.
Yeah, but with Dead Silence, I liked it, but again, it had that problem where it just goes over the top at the end. It's just kind of thinking what the audience wants, whereas you don't need to go that much over the top, but maybe for a modern audience you do, I don't know. But
the sight of Lin Shaye in a gas mask at a seance gyrating was just beyond laughable, I thought.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. I quite like the absurdity of that to some degree, but it's a flawed film, but but a fun one.
The other one I saw was I was saying I got drunk and ordered films I really had no interest in. I bought Red Scorpion on Blu-ray, which is an action film starring Dolph Lundgren, and the reason I bought it was because it was an Arrow release, and I'm really impressed with their catalogue so far, so I just bought it on a whim. And it's directed by Joe Zito, who did Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, and The Prowler, and he's a good director of this kind of thing. And Dolph Lundgren is absolutely no worse than Stallone, our friend of the podcast, Arnold Schwarzenegger. So it's basically just a muscle man going around the African desert with a machine gun shooting things up, and occasionally doing it in just a pair of hot pants. But no, it was entertaining enough, and there's like tons of extras on the Blu-ray as well, and it looks quite good, I thought. Finally, the other one I bought on Blu-ray was Husk, which is the sort of supernatural killer scarecrow movie, which I watched last night, and I thought was pretty darn good, actually. I mean, it's completely plotless, but I thought it merged kind of the Evil Dead and scarecrows together into a sort of semi-decent, cohesive film.
I saw that one. I don't remember much about it apart from is that the one where the car breaks down and they end up in the deserted farmhouse?
Yes, and there's a big cornfield, hence the title Husk. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Erik. How about you, Nathan? What have you been watching?
Let's see. The only thing I can think of that I've watched recently, I watched Otis again, which I really think is a really fun movie, and I would highly recommend it.
What's that about?
It's like this really kind of like disgusting looking guy who has no life, and he kidnaps these young, like beautiful, like teenage girls, and basically keeps them hostage. So they'll go to a like fake prom with him. Like he can have the high school experience that he thinks he should have had. And he's like a psychopath, and he basically kidnaps this girl who, is pretty smart for the most part. She's pretty resourceful, so I liked it.
So it's like the male version of the Lovely Ones, or whatever that movie was called.
Yeah, but this one it doesn't take itself seriously at all. It's actually really, really comical. I mean, one scene that I thought was really funny is there's a two people whose daughter is missing, and their daughter he's already murdered, and they don't know it yet. They're just on the news, and they're like, "Please bring our daughter home. We just want her. We just want her returned back to us." And then it cuts back to the newscaster. She goes, "Yeah, or what's left of her." And then the dad looks to mom, and he's like, "What did she just say?" I mean, it's full of little moments like that. Like, I love the newswoman throughout the movie because it's almost like she enjoys, like, talking, like, really morbid about the serial killer.
Okay, I'll have to look out for that one. Is it quite a recent film?
It's a few years old. Not many, though.
Yeah, okay. Well, it sounds good. Anything else?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you, Nathan. How about you, Joseph? What have you been watching?
Yeah, I watched Play Misty for Me on Friday. I'd seen it before, but it had been a while, but it's a really good movie. I don't care what really anyone says. I think Clint Eastwood's a pretty mediocre actor, but he's pretty good in the film. The woman, I never remember her name, plays the psycho, is really exceptional. I'm talking about like batshit crazy, and I love this movie more than Fatal Attraction because it does it first, and you can sympathize with Clint Eastwood more than you can Michael Douglas, because Michael Douglas, he kind of had it coming. I mean, he cheated on his wife. Clint Eastwood, I mean, the only thing he did was just lead this girl on when he didn't know better, but yeah, it's really suspenseful, and it has a really good ending when they actually play the song Misty again after the finale. But yeah, it's a really good movie. I was glad to see it again.
That's a great movie, isn't it? Yeah, I haven't seen it for a long time.
It's really good.
Yeah, excellent. And anything else?
Yeah, I watched The Changeling as well, and that's a film I always loved. But when I watched it again, I don't know. I read a review from who was it, Roger Ebert, who gave it 2.5 stars, and he said that the problem with the film was that the setup was scary, the actual house was scary, and a lot of moments in the film were scary. But George C. Scott was kind of miscast because you never really feel he's in any danger, because he just feels like he's self-contained, and he just kind of goes about like, he's going through the motions like, there's a ghost in here. Let me see if I can get rid of it. It's never about like, him fearing for his life. And I think that's one of the problems I had with the film watching it again, is that I never really thought that he was in any danger. The middle portion kind of dragged a little bit. So you're basically just kind of waiting for things to happen. When they do happen, they're pretty intense moments, but I mean, it's a little too long. I think it could have been shaved by about 25-30 minutes.
Yeah, so I mean, it has got some kind of bone-freezing moments in it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's got some really good, effective scares in the film, but it's just one of those, films that is a little too long. I think it could have been trimmed, quite significantly, and it probably would have been a lot, more leaner and meaner, if I could say that term.
Okay, cool.
But it's still a good film, but it's not as good as I remembered it being.
Okay. Anything else?
What else? I think the closest thing to horror is the weekend before we watched the Lord of the Flies remake, and we watched Summer Camp Nightmare, kind of doing a whole kids takeover type films. And my problem with Lord of the Flies is that it's a really good movie and it's got some harrowing scenes, but it reminded me of a Victor Salva film where you're watching a bunch of little boys run around half naked, and I was really creeped out by that. And as far as, the movie's quite good, but I just couldn't get past that. And I know it's, it's art, it's cinema, and I should, but at the same time, I'm like, for God's sakes, you crashed on this island with clothing. Put your clothes back on. And so I enjoyed Summer Camp Nightmare a lot more because it was extremely cheesy and extremely dated. I mean, that movie is so 80s. I mean, the hair, the clothing, I mean, it's just out of this world 80s. But so I enjoyed that a little more than, a bunch of naked little boys running around. But I think that's all that's my recently seen.
Okay, well, thank you, Joseph. Just quickly, I watched Deathline, which I think was released in America as Raw Meat, from 1973. It's the one set in the London Underground with the cannibals living in the London Underground. It's got Donald Pleasance in it playing a policeman, which is a great performance. But it's directed by Gary Sherman, who's an American director who directed Dead and Buried in 1981. And it's a really good film. It's a film I've seen several times before, but I forgot how gory it is. It's got got a shovel that splits someone's head in half. Someone gets run through with a broom. There's loads and loads of kind of rotting corpses and all sorts of, it's very, very gory and violent. Not quite as kitschy as a lot of British movies from the early 70s either, but it reminded me, because I think it was made either at the same time or I think it was before Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and it kind of predates the whole cannibal family thing, and also has the whole thing again of kind of these miners basically being buried alive or being trapped alive in the Victorian times, and then they breed and then they come out and basically they attack people in the underground late at night and then drag them back and either sort of have babies with them or eat them. But it's kind of reminded me of My Bloody Valentine a little bit of that whole trapped miner thing. Has anyone seen it?
Yes.
No,
not for a while though.
That. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, no, it's definitely.
I haven't seen it.
Yeah, it's a recommend for me, definitely. It's surprisingly gory for a film that old, and also it's kind of basically, I don't know if you ever saw Creep, with which was
I didn't care for that one that much.
No, I mean this is basically it's the same story almost, but it's much better.
I liked Creep, I have to say.
I liked bits of it. I didn't really think it added up to much.
See, the way I felt about Creep is the way I felt about Midnight Meat Train. I thought it had a great setup, but a very lousy payoff.
But no, that's definitely worth watching. The other film I saw, which I thought was very, very good indeed, was Julia's Eyes, which I hadn't seen for I hadn't seen before, and it's been out for I think it was made in 2010. And it's from the team that did Pan's Labyrinth and The Orphanage, and essentially the story is a couple of sisters, both with degenerative eye disorders. One's already gone blind and the other one's on her way to going blind. The blind sister hangs herself, or does she? And her sister goes out to try and prove that her sister didn't kill herself, and basically track down her murderer, her killer. It was very giallo-esque, very kind of very, very stylish. It kind of turns into a kind of slasher movie actually towards the end of it. But I thought that was very, very, very good. A Spanish language movie, obviously. Has anyone seen that?
No, but I did get it for my birthday on DVD, but I haven't watched it yet. But I'm very much looking forward to it now.
Yeah, it was definitely. Well, I thought it was great. I thought it was really, really good. Very, very suspenseful. There's a great scene, without giving anything away really, apart from where the woman goes into blind school, and there's in a locker room with lots of women who are all blind talking about her sister, and she's standing there and she realises that they don't know she's there, and then suddenly they realise she's there and they're all kind of looking around and grabbing for her. And it's just kind of really, really well done. But it's a very good film. But Nathan, Joseph, you've not seen it, have you?
No, it sounds good. I'll have to check that out.
I would check that. So it's a good film. And just very quickly, the other I saw The Woman in Black at the cinema, which was okay. It's some good, really good bits in it, but it was a bit. I didn't like the ending very much, but I won't spoil that if you've not seen the film.
Does the ending veer differently away from the ITV production?
Yes.
Oh, right.
It's a completely different ending to the book and the play and the TV adaptation, which kind of makes it into a more what you imagine as like a Hollywood film would do, which is really.
I just lost interest.
Yeah, but it's good. It's a good. The travel through it is pretty good. I mean, it looks great. There's some very effective scares throughout it. But it's not. For my money, the TV adaptation, which is quiet, kind of quieter horror, apart from some very jarring moments. Whereas in this, you saw a bit too much. You saw too much of The Woman in Black. Lots of ghost children, that kind of thing, which just kind of is not nearly as bad as something like the remake of The Haunting, which was ridiculously awful. But it's I had a good time with it at the cinema. There were people screaming and shouting all the way through it, so it's an effective roller coaster ride, but not as good as it could have been, unfortunately. But there you go. So that is our recently seen. So I think it's kind of time we start moving towards our Friday 13th kind of marathon, as it were. And Nathan, you had a question for us, I believe.
Oh, yes, I do have a question for all of you. I'm just curious and I'm just going to do this for the Friday the 13th series. You don't even have to just pick, part one. What character, before they died, would you most have liked to have been?
Who are you going to ask first? Or do you want to go first, Nathan?
I think I'd like to go last, so I'll just ask you first, Justin.
Well, I tried to wrap my brain thinking who would I like to be, and obviously a lot of them people die, so it's not something you would want. So I went for a survivor, and I decided to go for Muffin from Friday the 13th Part 2.
You'd look great with a bow in your hair.
Exactly, that's what I thought. A little bow in my hair, and people so happy to see me at the end. And I come in and you have that lovely little moment where everyone's sort of like, everything's all right. And then, of course, you have the shock ending. But, everyone thinks you're dead, but then you turn up for the happy ending. And I thought that'd be nice. That's what I'd like to be, Muffin.
See, the only problem with that, Justin, is that being a dog, you wouldn't have opposable thumbs, so you couldn't drink your wine.
That's true. But someone could put some in a little bowl for me, couldn't they? And I could lap it up.
Yes.
And also, I'm sitting here with a little bottle of water today, so I'm not drinking either. So there you go.
I don't know, Justin. I guess I always thought of you more like Junior from Part 5.
Did you? What? How rude. No.
Chop him and kill him! Yeah.
No, well, that's me. That's a Muffin all the way.
Okay, it's Muffin.
Muffin, yes.
What about you, Joseph?
Well, I had to think on this, and I guess it would be Court from Part 6, only because he gets to have sex with Darcy DeMoss, and I love Darcy DeMoss.
Yeah, but you got to keep it up till the end of the song.
Well, I wouldn't have that
Which
problem.
is 10 minutes.
Yeah, which is 10 minutes long.
It's a 12-inch remix, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you say 12-inch?
I did.
Ooh,
matron.
Yeah, so there's my...
Matron, please, I'm not that kind of doctor.
Eric.
Okay, I'd quite like to be Edna from the start of Part 3, because then I'd get to be married to Harold.
Oh, really?
Ew.
Oh, yes.
In reality, I'm probably more closely related to Crispin Glover in Part 4, because I also dance in what can only be described as an avant-garde manner.
Okay. Yes. Well,
Did you break up with BJ Betty?
I did, because the computer told me I was a dead fuck.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. How about you, Nathan? Who are you going to be?
Let's see. I think, and I want to pretend that she did not die, and neither did he, and they ended up hooking up. So in that case, I'd want to be Laura Marie Taylor from Friday the 13th Part 2, because I really, really, really think Mark is like really super hot. So, like, I always feel bad that they never got to hook up. So in my version, they did. Okay. And I'd be her.
Well, I feel really uncomfortable now.
Why do you feel uncomfortable?
Yeah, you're uncomfortable after saying you want to hook up with, what was his name?
Harold,
yeah. Oh, gosh.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I can see this
Fair
whole
enough.
kind of new kind of erotic fiction, fan fiction coming from Friday the 13th series, which probably nobody wants to read.
Ironically, they call that slash.
They do, don't they? Yes.
Yeah, slash fiction.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Maybe.
Don't ask me how I know that.
Yeah. Right. Well, we shall gloss over that, but I like that question, Nathan. So thank you very much. I think leading on to more Friday 13th goodness or badness, whichever way it's going to go, we're going to choose some of our top 3 Friday 13th moments from the series, not including Part 1, because obviously we're going to be talking about Part 1 at some length a little bit later in the show. We've got some sound clips of some of them, but not all of them. But to start off with, we have Joseph's number 3.
You broke up with BJ Betty, so to speak. And would you lighten up on her? She's all right.
I'll say she's all right. You should have treated her right. I mean, that girl wanted to be treated right.
I did. I treated her right. That's what's driving me so crazy. I mean, first I would call her and she would take my calls, but she would have something that she'd have to do. And then she wouldn't even take my calls. I mean, can you figure that? What the fuck happened?
Let me put it in the old computer.
No, I'm serious about this.
The computer don't lie. Now, let's see.
What?
It says you're a dead fuck.
What? A dead fuck?
A lousy lay. You know? A dead pig.
Oh, I see. Oh, don't hold it back from me, Doc. I can take it. Give it to me straight.
I did not say it. The computer did.
Yeah, well, there is no computer.
Aha! And there's no Betty either.
And I'm a dead fuck.
Like I said, the computer don't lie.
Oh, God, I'm horny.
Right, Joseph, why do you choose that as your third most favourite Friday moment?
I don't know. I really love those characters of Jimbo and Teddy Bear. I think they're the epitome of like likable teenagers, and then that whole dialogue scene I just think is kind of funny, and it kind of gives them some good character moments before the slaughter happens. So that's my number 3.
Okay. What about you, Nathan? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay.
See, I also like that. They toy with poor Jimbo. He's such a doofus, but he actually ends up getting the girl before he dies. So, yeah, good for him. Good for him.
Did anyone know if Crispin Glover, what his thoughts are on the Friday movies or his part in them?
I don't know. I've never really heard him talk about them that much.
I have Crystal Lake Memories here beside me, so I'm wondering if he's in that. Is he? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's just because I've noticed that there's certainly, when we talk about the first film in some detail later, that it's the same old faces that turn up in conventions. Not same old faces, but same people who celebrate the film and are quite happy to talk about it. But there's quite a few people who aren't obviously that happy to talk about it, presumably. But yeah, I just wondered. But while you're looking that up, Erik, thank you, Joseph. Here's Nathan's number 3.
Now, Sheriff, you better hear me and hear me good. I want this loony bin closed down. Do you hear me, fella?
Okay, Nathan, where do you think she had a bomb?
I have no idea where she had the bomb on herself. I don't know. Those characters are so ridiculously over the top. I mean, they make me laugh just because it's so. I mean, she's talking to the sheriff this way, and like she flips him off as they're driving away. I mean, I love those characters. I was kind of sad to see them go.
No, it's kind of. I've made my feelings clear before on Friday the 13th Part 5. I've never been a huge fan of that movie, but I guess I could probably grudgingly grow to like it or love it. But
I think Ethel epitomizes everything that's both right and simultaneously wrong with Friday the 13th Part 5.
There's nothing wrong with Friday.
Well, no, she was one of the reasons I hated the film when I first saw it, and she's now one of the reasons why I like it so much.
Oh, I love Ethel. I think she's hilarious. I love the part where the guy comes to the door. She's like, "Holy shit! Who the fuck are you? What the fuck do you want?"
Yes,
that woman just gives it her all. She just takes the role and makes it her own.
Yes. Well, okay. Well, I'm sure we'll get on to Friday the 13th Part 5 at some point. Yes, I think we'll agree to disagree on that. But thank you.
I just found a quick quote from Crispin Glover.
Yeah.
While we're there, he doesn't have much input into Crystal Lake Memories, but what he does say is that I don't regret any of the films I've done in my career, and I certainly don't regret the final chapter.
Okay, all right, fair enough. I appreciate. Yeah. Well, we'll come on to people like Kevin Bacon, obviously not literally, but a little bit later.
Well, you wouldn't, because you're a vegetarian.
Yeah, well, he's.
Boom,
that's rotten. That was a rotten joke. That was terrible.
And Erik,
that was the best joke I have.
Oh well, it's going to be a long and bumpy ride. Erik, what's your number 3? Because we haven't got a sound clip for this one. So
no, my number 3 is from the final chapter as well. It's the character of Paul, who he has just pissed off his girlfriend by flirting shamelessly with one of the naughty twins. So she storms off in a huff for a midnight skinny dip, as you do. Looks absolutely freezing in the film, and apparently it was in reality too. So he follows her out, finds her dead in the rubber dinghy in the middle of the lake. So he swims frantically back to shore, and as he gets back to the pier, he is harpooned in a place a man does not want to be harpooned. His nether regions. And not only does that, actually Jason fires the harpoon gun as well, so you can imagine it sort of going up through his innards. It's probably the most cringe-inducing ouch moment in the entire series, I think.
Yes, that is pretty kind of. I can imagine the collective gasp in the theatres must have been quite loud, wasn't it, at that point?
Like this.
Yes, ooh, like that. Yes.
Yeah, you show him how to gasp.
I show him how to gasp, yeah.
Yes.
I'm sure that scene would have made Freud's head explode.
Yeah.
A harpoon gun to the male genital region.
Yes.
It's probably something you can read into.
He was probably watching that while eating a banana or smoking a cigar.
Or traveling on a train through a tunnel.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Tell me about your mother.
Well, that's the thing with the first. I mean, there isn't any kind of not explicit, but crotch and genital violence. Is there in any of the other films? Really, is there apart from? Well, certainly not in the first film, but it's obviously that whole.
Well, in
sex
part
sequence
3, what's his face? What's his name? The obnoxious
Andy.
kid.
Andy.
Yeah, he gets split in half. I wonder if I'm sure since he's on his hands, I'm sure he goes through his legs first.
Hmm.
So that's probably a genital atrocity.
Well, from one genital atrocity to another. Here's my number 3. Any ideas what that was?
Was that Rob being killed in the final chapter?
No. Well,
No?
I think because I kind of came to this after I did these not last minute, but after you'd all chosen yours, and so I thought I'd go for some of the films that weren't talked about, and this one is Jason Goes to Hell, and it's the tent kill.
Oh yeah.
When the couple are having sex, and Jason comes from behind with a huge. Well, I don't know what it actually is. It's some kind of thing on the end of a stick, isn't it? And he kind of basically stabs it right through the woman who's on top of the man, and then rips it through her body, and then she splits in half. Now, it's interesting for a couple of reasons. One is obviously it's insanely gory, and it does things that most of the other sequels just weren't able to do at all. But also because the woman in it is an actress called Michelle Clooney, who, if that name rings any bells, she played Melanie on Queer as Folk, the long-running American remake or redo of the British series. And she was in that for about 5 series. But she was, I think that was her first ever role, was as the victim who's naked and gets ripped in half by Jason in Jason Goes to Hell.
Do you know who else is in Queer as Folk, the US version? Is John Fury from Friday the 13th Part 2.
That's right, yes. Yes, I remember seeing him looking quite haggard, but I suppose he must be.
He does. He hasn't aged well, has he?
No, he hasn't aged well. But yes, well, that's my number 3. Is it time for a cat, do you think?
It's time.
Okay.
I love it. Oh my God.
Yeah. That's my number 2. That's the extremely obnoxious sound effect from Friday the 13th Part 5 when someone gets whacked at with a machete or an axe or whatever. It makes this extremely loud wonk sound, and I've always found it just so over the top and hilarious. Every time I hear it, it's just the funny part is that, okay, this is a spoiler. If you haven't seen Friday the 13th Part 5, then why are you listening to this show? Obviously, you know that Jason is not the killer. It's Roy donning the Jason mask. But the thing is, Roy barely swings his weapons. The part where the stuttering kid is in the hallway is the greatest example. When he walks up and the lightning flashes and you see Roy holding that meat cleaver and he drops it down on his face, he barely swings. I mean, he barely moves it, yet it makes that loud whoosh sound, and I've always found it just hilarious. So that's my number 2.
Would you think they did that to make up for the fact they had to cut a lot of the violence out?
Could be.
But the MPAA were always kind of they would say things like, that sound effect is too gruesome, please reduce it, didn't they? So, but I kind of guess that probably was a way of, they managed to get that through. Because I know it was cut quite a lot, wasn't it, Part 5?
It was cut even more for us, actually, Justin. We got a further minute, I think, taken out of it than they got in the
Justin,
States.
When I was on Alt Horror years ago, I don't remember who it was, but someone sent me a Danish cut of Part 5. Yeah. And the only thing different in this one is that they lingered on Eddie when he gets the strap around his eyes.
Okay.
When the belt digs into his eyes, they actually was a lot gorier, and you could see pus coming out from the top of it. And but the quality was so bad, and I really wish I still had that so I could put that scene online. But so apparently there is uncut footage out there. They just haven't released it yet, and I really wish they would.
In the version we got over here, we didn't see anything of Eddie's death. We only saw the hands twisting the strap. Demon's death was particularly shorter, and also we didn't see Debbie Sue Voorhees' eyes being gouged out either. There was a lot of stuff missing from the Part 5 release back in the 80s.
I mean, I think the DVD release in the UK now and Ireland is probably as complete as it is in the States. But yes, back then it was kind of they cut loads of that out. Although it was the second to last film to get released at cinema in this country, it went in the UK. But I think the whole raison d'etre of like the Friday the 13th films was the death scenes, and of course, when you take those away almost completely, then it does harm them. So
that's why Part 7 doesn't really work for me at all.
You see, I prefer Part 7 to Part 5 personally. That's just me. I think it's a more fun film, but you know, what's life without a few differences? Have you got any thoughts on that, Nathan?
I think both Part 5 and 7 are terrific.
Okay, well, thank you. The voice of reason. Thank you.
Part 7 doesn't have wonk sound effects, though.
No, it does not.
No.
It doesn't have Ethel.
No, it doesn't have Ethel, but we can be thankful for small mercies. Nathan, what's your number 2? Well, actually, before I ask you, I'll give you a little bit of a...
My second choice is from Friday the 13th Part 2, and it's actually Mark's death scene. I think it's cruel enough that the guy's in a wheelchair, but the fact that Jason just slams that machete right through his face, and then his wheelchair goes like flying backwards down those stairs. I mean, I just thought that was really, really well done and really startling, because it happens so fast. I think it's one of my favorite death scenes in the whole series.
It's kind of it's very, very, very well done, isn't it? I do wonder, the whole controversy about Bay of Blood, Mario Bard's Bay of Blood, and what they copied and didn't copy. One thing just occurred to me now actually, is when you're talking about the wheelchair death, is obviously at the beginning of Bay of Blood, there is the old woman in the wheelchair, isn't there, at the beginning of that film? So I wonder, how far, if the film was indeed inspired by Bay of Blood, which it seemed like obviously it was. I think because at some point Sean Cunningham was saying that Halloween wasn't an inspiration for Friday the 13th, when clearly it was. So I think sometimes you have to take things with a pinch of salt. But that's a great scene, one of the best in the series, I think. What about you, Erik and Joseph? What do you think?
Yeah, that's definitely one of my favorite scenes, and it's one of the effect sequences in Part 2 that I think survives the MPAA cutting. I mean, we can only wish for what could have been with the double impalement, but I think we get everything we want with the wheelchair death.
Yeah, excellent. Okay.
We've got to, Nathan, I just want you to know that we're all here to support you in your love and loss, feelings of loss for Mark from Friday the 13th Part 2. I didn't realize the love was that strong.
Indeed.
Well, the poor guy. It just I feel really, really bad for him too.
Without further ado, anything you wanted to add, Joseph?
Yeah, I just want to say it is an effective death scene because the guy, he's in a wheelchair. He's vulnerable, and you don't really know if something's going to happen during that scene. It's just kind of slowly panning on the back of him, and then whack, there it is. And you're like, wow, they actually went through and killed this poor guy. It's really shocking. Yeah, it's a good scene.
Excellent. Okay. Well, let's go on to Erik and his little bit of. So, Erik, what's your number 2?
Well, my number 3, and I'd be interested to hear your take on this, Justin, because you're the only one of us, I think, who has seen Friday the 13th Part 3 in its 3D format. It's the eyeball pop, where now the series was never one for realism, really, to be honest. But at least the first 2 episodes had one foot in the real world. But in Part 3, it begins to start stepping over into the absurd with wild abandon, and no more better example really than the scene where Rick, played by Paul Kratka, has his head crushed and his eyeball pops out in what I imagine was quite a stunning effect in 3D, although it does cut quite quickly from it. So I'm wondering if it had time to register really with the audience, because with 3D sometimes you need it to linger for a few seconds really to get the full effect. But it's just such an absurd moment, and especially in the 2D version where you can actually see the wires on which the eyeball is being propelled. It adds to the silliness of it. So I mean, I was wondering, when you saw it in 3D, did that effect really work really well, or was it just too quick for it to register?
To be honest, I don't remember. I do remember the things, the kind of the depth shots were really, really good. Like, the flapping, washing, and the when Harold's got that, when he's got that the broom handle he's poking out of the screen. Those kind of effects work really, really well. I think it probably was affected by the shortness, but I think from what I've heard, what I kind of remember is that it was effective, and you were like, because your eye was tricked to looking at the eyeball rather than looking around the eyeball. But then, of course, it's strange, isn't it? Because you think back in 1982, when there was a burgeoning video explosion, they must have known that it was going to be released in 2D and also on television as well. So I'm surprised they didn't either shoot a different version for that, or but then yes,
I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah, no, it's kind of fun. It's fun. So yeah, a good choice. Any other thoughts, guys?
I like that scene. I think part 3 is probably, of the first 7, it's probably my least favorite, but I do like that scene. I also like the just trying to be 3D scenes, like the yo-yo scene. Like, hey, look at us, we're 3D. We're going to have a yo-yo in front of the camera for about 30 seconds.
Well, you see, that's exactly what I think is missing from modern 3D films. Is there's just that shamelessness, which I wish. In modern things, it would probably look good, but back then, it's just like they were just, it didn't really look good, and they were looking for excuses to try it out. So, they did like inanimate things that have nothing to do with the plot. It's like, Andy, playing with the yo-yo, and what was the other one? Chili handing the joint to Andy in the van. Yeah,
yeah, it's silly, but I agree. It's so dated and such a poor effect now, but it has that kind of that value you were talking about.
Yeah, no, definitely. Excellent. Well, good choice. I'll give myself a little bit of a cat, but not too much. And here's my number 2.
It's over.
Okay, well, that is from probably the most hated of all the Friday the 13th sequels, which is Jason Takes Manhattan, Part 8. It isn't a good film by any stretch at all, but I do, and also the film is a cheat because the film only takes part in Manhattan a little bit, and the vast majority of it is actually filmed in Vancouver, so it wasn't even Manhattan where it's filmed. But having said that, I do love that scene where the surviving couple come out into Times Square and they think it's all over, and then Jason comes up out the subway, and she turns around and she sees him, and they start running, and then Jason starts chasing them, and he knocks over the punk's ghetto blaster, and then they all get their flick knives out and all go, start saying, "Come on, then, let's." And then he just lifts. You don't see what's under his mask at the time, but he lifts up his mask, and they see it, and then they all run off screaming like little girls. So that was, I thought I'd just give a little bit of love to a much much hated film, and understandably so. But I thought there's a little bit of magic in the big turd that is Jason Takes Manhattan. Any other thoughts on that, guys?
It's been so long since I've seen Jason Takes Manhattan. I really don't remember much about it except the scene where he boxes with that guy on the rooftop and he punches his head off. Other than that, it's been so long, I don't really remember much about it.
I still think it's slightly better than Jason Goes to Hell, which for me is definitely the worst entry in the series.
I think so too. I think that Jason Goes to Hell is the worst entry in the series.
I don't. I think Jason X is the worst in the series.
I quite like Jason X. I kind of think it's...
I hated it.
I don't know. It's like so bad it's good for me for some reason. I get some enjoyment out of it.
See, I didn't mind Jason Goes to Hell. It didn't feel like a Friday the 13th film. It felt more like The Hidden, but I didn't mind it. I thought it was okay.
I think that's what I'd say with Jason X and Jason Goes to Hell and Jason Takes Manhattan. They're full of films that have got not lots, but a few good moments in them.
Well, they're also gimmick movies. I mean, one is he's going to Manhattan, one is he's swapping bodies, and the other is he's going to space. So,
Well, Jason Goes to Hell was a major misstep, wasn't it? Really, that whole kind of body swapping thing, they're doing the hidden thing, it just wasn't what audience wanted to see, did they? And I think they kind of they started off great, and that kill, the tent kill, I thought was really, really good. But yeah, it kind of just lost its way completely.
It's like Halloween 3. If you treat it as as sort of its own movie, it's really not a bad film, but it's not really a great Friday the 13th film.
No, fair enough. Okay, well, let's get on to our number ones, and start us off. Joseph, here's your number one.
Cloudy in the mountains, sunny in the valleys, and snow flurries up your nose.
Okay, Joseph, take it away.
Well, I've already said that Billy is such a tragic figure. I mean, his only crime was wanting to party, and he gets killed for it. But I don't know. It's like Friday the 13th Part 5 is filled with so many obnoxious, off-the-wall characters, and Billy's one of them. I mean, he's over the top, he's silly, he is obnoxious, but I don't know. It's just, he reminds me of like a guy that used to be friends with my father. So that's kind of one of those, hey, it's him, he looks just like so-and-so moments. And I've always got a kick out of just that whole him and Lana back and forth scene. And I don't know, so I guess that's why I picked it. I could have picked like a death scene or a scary scene, but I don't know. I just thought I'd go with something, like Friday the 13th Part 5, offbeat and off the beaten path.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, what about you, Nathan? We talked a little bit about Friday the 13th Part 5, but is that a scene that stands out for you?
Well, I think that scene doesn't really stand out that much for me. I don't really know anybody like Billy, but the only reason it stands out for me is because Joseph loves it so much, so I always remember it. And I do love Lana, though. I think that she's a lot of fun with her. Eric's better at impersonating her than I am.
It's showtime.
Girl, you are so hot. Has anyone noticed that her breasts are kind of lopsided?
Can't say I noticed.
No, I can't say
I didn't notice either.
No.
Yeah, they are. One's bigger than the other.
Ooh, what does it inflate during the film?
Yeah, I don't know what's wrong. Maybe she needs a mammogram or something.
Ooh, okay, right. Well, we'll have to look out for next time we watch that film. But thank you, Joseph, for your number one. I haven't got a sound clip for Nathan's, but what is your number one, Nathan?
Jenny kicked Jason in the balls.
Okay. So I was wrong about the no mutual genital.
Yes, so was I, yeah. Forgot about that.
Yeah, so that's Jason, so you were kind of right, actually.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, okay. So maybe that's why he's getting back at Part 4, wasn't he, for Ginny kicking him in the balls. So
possibly. Yeah.
So why did you love that scene so much?
I just think it's funny because I guess it's the only time we've ever seen Jason kicked in the balls, and it seemed to really hurt him.
You kind of get an impression that these days, the later films, that
he probably don't have any anymore.
No, exactly. It probably wouldn't do much to him, would it?
No.
Why was so mad?
Yeah.
If he'd have sex at least once in his life, he probably wouldn't go around killing people who were having sex.
He could have with Chris in Part 3. We never really, and then she blacks out, and then she wakes up, and it's a long time later or something. I mean, what did he do to her? Oh, I wonder. That'll be a discussion for Part 3, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Well, anything else you want to say about that, Nathan?
It's a fun scene.
Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you. And Erik, we've got a little bit of music for yours. How much of this do you want us to play? Just
all of it.
All of it,
maybe 20 seconds will be enough.
Okay. Here we go. Here's Eric's number one. I'll have this playing quietly in the background while you talk.
Oh, excellent! Yeah, that's a track called Punk Funk by Harry Manfredini, and it's one of the tunes that Violet, played by Tiffany Helm, dances to in, once again, Friday the 13th, A New Beginning. Now, if I was to be a character, it probably would be Tiffany Helm, I have to say, because I do like dancing like a robot, it has to be said. Now, in some quarters, she is referred to in this film as a goth. Now, Justin, I'm sure you would take issue with that.
She wasn't a goth, no.
No, she wears eyeliner, and that's as close to goth as she gets. She's more sort of a new wave type person. I mean, that's certainly not goth music we're listening to in the background. And when she listens to Pseudo Echo performing There's a Man With No Life in His Eyes, that's definitely not a goth track. So, yeah, it's a wonderfully cheesy moment. I mean, up to this point, Friday the 13th wasn't really indulging in fads as such, but in part 5 they do, with this robotic breakdancing girl, and I'm sure that within 2 weeks of the film being released, it already had dated it. But as you know, I'm a huge fan of all things 80s and all things dance, so this is why this is my number one. It's Violet, dressed as if somebody from the 80s had vomited all over her, as if the 80s itself had vomited all over her, doing a robotic dance to a song called Punk Funk.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Joseph, anything you want to add to that?
It's a great scene. I love that music. Harry Manfredini's music, like his little clips, I think are even better than his actual, like, the score that he puts in the movies. Because if you notice, like, between the Friday the 13th films and Slaughter High, all of his soundtrack work sounds very similar. But all the little things like Punk Funk and Billy's heavy metal stuff and all the other music, I like that stuff. It's all different. And it's just, it's so catchy. And I love that scene. I'm glad you picked that, Erik.
Thank you.
How about you, Nathan? Are you a fan of that?
Oh, yes, I love Violet. I think that she is an amazing character, and I think she should have survived.
But of course, previously, didn't she? Her death was much more, how can I put it, a little bit along the lines of Patrick's Still Lives, wasn't it?
It was. Speaking of genital deaths. Yeah.
Wasn't it a machine?
Apparently she was to be stabbed sort of lower down, but they decided against it in the end. If you actually, I think in Crystal Lake Memories, there's a still, behind the scenes still, showing you just exactly the aftermath, what it would look like.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Yes, well, I don't think there's any genital mutilation in my choice, but here we go. It's my number one. Yes, continuing my love-hate relationship with
I knew you were going to pick that.
Did you?
Yes.
I just love that. Yeah, I mean, I've had long documented. Dana was sort of obviously slightly deluded with the idea that she kind of toned down the films and all these kind of things. But as bad as it is, her performance is actually very good in some ways, because it is. It's where. The Friday the 13th films, as you've already said, we've already talked about, has tipped into that kind of the camp, not camp as in like, camp at Crystal Lake, but as in camp as a row of tents. It kind of gets a little bit sort of silly, and I think her performance really suits that, because it is so over the top. And also, I love that whole thing. You basically, it's where Jason becomes the boogeyman in some ways, because although in part 2 he survives a lot of violence against him, the whole thing kicking him in the balls and stuff. He's still human. But by part 3, although it's not explicitly supernatural by any stretch, he's still able to survive being thrown out the top of a barn and hung, and then pulling himself up and grinning as if he's like really keen, and then getting an axe in the head. And I think I just find that the end of that film, and Dana's guppy performance, mouth flapping open and shut as she goes mad, is fantastic. And the one thing, it's such a shame, is we never, although we've seen photos, we've never actually seen the sequence where she gets her head lopped off at the end, because that would be a fitting end for Dana. But yeah. So I'm sure you all know that ending. So
yes.
Anything to add?
I can't say anything bad about Dana anymore, because after meeting her and her being so nice and lovely, and I can't say anything bad about her anymore. I'm sorry.
No, well, I've come to love Xana, and I think she's very, her performance is fun. And that's the best way to describe it.
It is over the top. Yeah, I like that. I like her sweater. Her sweater is very fitting in that film.
Yes,
it's a gorgeous sweater. Yeah.
Right. Well,
in fairness to Dana Kimmel, she's not the worst actor in that film by a long shot.
Her boyfriend is the worst actor in the film.
Or Chili, whose name I can't remember.
Chili's pretty bad.
Rachel Howard.
God. Yes, she's
Paul
pretty
Crack
bad.
is the worst, though. Paul Crack is the worst.
All right. Well, that is our top 3 Friday the 13th moments. What are yours? Have you why don't you write in or phone in and let us know? Probably a good time to give contact details, Joseph, if you've got them to hand.
Yes, you can reach us via email. That's the.hysteria.continues@gmail.com. We are on Twitter. That's twitter.com/THC_podcast. We're on Facebook as well. That's facebook.com/The Hysteria Continues. You can send us a voicemail. That's 858-233-9281. We're also on the Body Count Continues forums, which is my site. A lot of us post there. That's the/bodycount/continues.com. And finally, if you'd like to carry us around the body, you can purchase t-shirts from cafepress.com/The Hysteria Continues.
Thank you, Joseph. Yes, well, I think it's time.
Okay, well, as if it needs explaining at all, because I'm sure anyone listening to this podcast has seen Friday the 13th multiple times. But for the sake of completeness, Friday the 13th opens in 1958 with 2 canoodling camp counselors being offed by an unseen assailant. We then cut to the present, which we assume to be 1980, but it's actually referred to later in the series in the final chapter, in fact, as 1979. And we meet a group of nubile young counselors who are getting the camp ready for a big reopening. But that same unseen assailant from all those years ago is doing their best to make sure the camp never gets reopened. My relationship with the Friday the 13th franchise was a bit strange in that I saw part 6 first, and that was followed by the final chapter. And it was only then that I started to watch them in sequence. So by the time I got around to watching part 1, I knew some of the major surprises in the film, and I certainly knew about the end shock sequence inspired by Carrie, as many people have pointed out. So I should probably point out at this stage, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Friday the 13th, but I can't imagine there's anyone listening to this who hasn't. So Friday the 13th is kind of rough around the edges, to be sure, and I won't disagree with that or argue with that, but I still think it's very much underappreciated, certainly in the mainstream, but even within horror fandom itself. I mean, a lot of people think that its sole source of interest are the gory effects by Tom Savini, but I think there's much more to the film than that. And I'm not ashamed to controversially announce that I think Friday the 13th is as good as John Carpenter's Halloween. You can gasp if you want. I think they're equally good, but in very different ways. I think Halloween is the much more polished film. It has a much more professional look, and it's better for eerie moments and for genuine scares. Whereas Friday the 13th, I think, is better as a kind of roller coaster ride with more thrills and more shocks. So I think the two can happily coexist side by side at the sort of upper tier of slasher movies. But in my mind, there are some genuinely eerie moments in the film, like the scene where Ned, the Joker in the film, he sees a shadowy figure walking into the cabin and he follows them in, never to be seen again alive. I thought that the way that's shot, I thought was quite eerie. Or the scene where Brenda she's in the bathroom brushing her teeth, and we can see somebody's hand moving against a curtain in the sort of shower cubicles. Again, quite subtle, which the film isn't often credited for. People often just accuse it of being quite crude and just a series of gory set pieces. But I think, as I said, I think there's more to it than that. And I really like Adrienne King as the final girl, Alice. And I know a lot of people probably wouldn't agree, but I think she has a great girl next door appeal. And she really reminds me of one of my favorite 80s actresses, Molly Ringwald, particularly in the scene where she finds the snake in the cabin. Just the way she looks in that scene really, really reminds me of Molly Ringwald, sort of Breakfast Club era, not now, where she looks a bit chubby. And all the characters have at least sort of one trait that makes them distinguishable from another, which is something that maybe later entries in the series neglected to address. You have Ned, who's a practical joker. You have Kevin Bacon, who's the stud. You have Marcy, who is the one with the strange shower dream. And even like Steve Christie has his trademark moustache. And then we have, of course, pre-fame Kevin Bacon in there. 2 years kind of before he hit the big time with Diner. And he delivers what I would consider kind of a monotone performance. And certainly there's no indication in Friday the 13th that he would become the superstar he did. But in his defense, I think he was given some rather dreadful dialogue to deliver in the film. And Justin, I think you have a clip there
here we go.
of Kevin Bacon's dialogue. This is what he has to
Shifted
say.
a good 180 degrees. It's gonna storm. Can tear down that valley like a son of a gun. Shifted a good 180 degrees. 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 Shifted a good 180 degrees.
To quote Ross from Friends, or actually Chandler from Friends, God, he must be good in bed. Because if his sort of chat appliance to his girlfriend are the wind has shifted a good 180 degrees, I mean, he must have something else going for him, because I would run a mile if somebody started a conversation like that, I have to say. Now, a spoiler alert again, because I'm going to reveal the killer's identity now, which I think is kind of a cheat, in fairness, because Mrs. Voorhees, who is the killer, appears out of nowhere. You know, Betsy Palmer does not appear anywhere in the film until we hit about the 70-minute mark. You know, I thought it would have been nice if there had been sort of a blink and you miss it moment, maybe in the diner earlier in the film, where Mrs. Voorhees is in the background even. She doesn't have to have a line, but so it's a bit of a cheat. But in fairness, when I watched this for the first time, that didn't bother me. It's only when you see films like maybe like My Bloody Valentine, Happy Birthday to Me, where there's that whodunit element that you think, why didn't Friday the 13th sort of have that sort of, you know, mechanism in it? It would have made more sense. But once Betsy Palmer arrives on the screen, she is just fantastic. She is so over the top. In fact, she's so brilliant that she gave me nightmares when I was young. I had this dream when I was young that terrified me, where I was being chased around my hometown of Kilkenny. I was chased into a pound shop, which is a shop where everything is a pound. And she was chasing me around with sort of wielding a knife, and she had a really maniacal laugh about her. And, you know, that scarred me for weeks after that. You know, one of my big disappointments about Friday the 13th was that, as I said, I'd seen the final chapter before I saw the first one, so I knew that Jason jumps out of the lake at the end. And I really would have liked to have had that as a surprise for the film, because I showed Friday the 13th to some friends who were over. There was about 10 of us there. And when Jason jumps out of the lake at the end, at least 5 of them screamed and jumped out of their seat. And I would have liked to have had that experience myself. But, you know, I had spoiled it by watching the final chapter first, because you see Jason in the opening montage, and it sort of gives away, you know, a number of different elements. Incidentally, the other film I showed them that night was Prom Night, and it went down like a complete lead balloon. Everyone was really bored by it. I suppose, I mean, again, as I've said before in the podcast, I think Prom Night works better as kind of a silly high school drama, and the horror elements, you know, are less effective. So I think, back to Friday the 13th, it has a degree of suspense that I don't think it gets credited for. I think it has some genuine scares. I think that the effects by Tom Savini were once stunning, but I think they look really dated now, particularly when Jack gets the arrow through his neck. I think it looks really, really phony. But I remember seeing that for the first time and thinking it was the most stunning piece of special effects I'd ever seen in my life. And I mean, above all else, the film is just great fun, and I don't think critics could see that aspect. I mean, I don't care how stupid Strip Monopoly is. I don't care that Jack won't shut up about the wind shifting a good 180 degrees. I don't care that Brenda is talking about vitamin C neutralizing the nitrites. That doesn't bother me. That just adds to all the fun. It's just cheesy fun. And in fact, you know, the film is the perfect blueprint for the slasher boom that followed. And just to sum up, I love Friday the 13th so much that I want to take it away on a holiday to a 5-star hotel and do rude things to it.
Wow.
So there we go.
Well, thank you, Erik.
And Nathan, what would you think? What are your thoughts on Friday?
Now I'm uncomfortable. No, I love Friday the 13th, and you didn't get any gasps from me, Erik, because I agree with you. I think that Friday the 13th and Halloween are both on par with each other. They're both excellent in their own way. I've always thought that Friday the 13th, now I have to admit, I've always kind of preferred part 2, but I still think part one is a very, great film. I love all the characters, and I really love the scene where Marcy is telling Jack about her dream, about the rain coming down and it's blood. I don't know why. I just thought that was kind of a haunting, like, little story that she tells, especially, like with the storm coming in and, like the scene with Ned where he'd followed the shadow figure into the cabin just a few minutes earlier. I don't know. It just all seems to come together really, really well for me. One thing I'm curious about, though, actually there's two things I'm curious about that I'd like your guys' opinion on. The first thing is, why was Mrs. Voorhees wearing a sweater in the summertime? I mean,
she thought it was stylish.
It's a big, bulky sweater, and it's summer.
It was stylish at the time. It doesn't matter the temperature. It was style. She wanted to be,
Yeah. Even Tyra was wearing big sweaters back then.
Yeah.
Okay.
She's going to kill people. She at least wanted to be stylish about it.
Exactly. Good job she wasn't wearing high heels, because that would have been made the job much harder, wouldn't it?
Speaking of clothes, what I'm always intrigued about is Steve Christie wears denim hot pants and a cravat, and yet he seems interested in women.
Yes, well, that's a very good point, actually, isn't it? But because there's obviously the film is kind of hinting, well, more than hinting, that him and Alice are having some kind of affair, aren't they? Or
yes.
So, what other thoughts you got, Nathan? Or
were the two counselors killed in the very beginning? Were they supposed to be the two that were supposed to be watching Jason? Because, like, they're the two that get killed, and then there's no other deaths until, the, present day at the time when, this group of counselors are getting stalked. Because in the meantime, we heard that Mrs. Voorhees, we don't hear that she'd done it, but, I mean, that the water had gone bad, and there had been some fires, and, it seems like at first she had tried to, peacefully, or not, peacefully in her way, try to, get people not to reopen the camp without having to go on that killing rampage that she went on. But she did kill those two at the very beginning. So I don't know if we're supposed to believe that they're the two that, that are inadvertently caused Jason's death.
It's difficult to know, isn't it? Because I think I kind of guess they were kind of intended to be. Although, having said that, she in 79 or 80, she was going back and killing. She had that psychosis that she was blaming the counsellors who probably weren't even born at that point, so I don't know. I mean, it's just indicative of that, but I kind of got the impression, like you, that she, after the original double killing, she just did what she could to stop the camp reopening. But I agree. Just one of the things, just very quickly, is I think it was Erik was saying about, it probably would have worked better if they'd had Betsy Palmer in the kind of the shop, the diner or whatever, the cafe at the beginning. I think Betsy Palmer actually said to Sean Cunningham, "I don't understand why you don't just have me, as a peripheral character, so the audience says, they've seen me before." I would have been. I would have been. Tell you who would have been funny if they turned out to be the killer. It would have been that waitress at the diner,
Sandy.
So a really bad actress. So that would have been good. She'd come down. She'd in a little uniform with a little hat on, and she with a machete. That would have been.
And
good.
her enormous glasses.
Yes, exactly. And Alice could have bashed them off the glasses, and then it's a kind of a Deirdre Barlow kind of moment. But yeah. So.
Is there any theories on how Brenda died? I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, we don't really see how she died. We just see the ropes around her and her body's thrown through a window. But I'm like,
we see, did anyone notice her head moving? When she's thrown through the window, it cuts to Alice, then it cuts back to Brenda, and you can see her head move.
Because that's Tom Savini being thrown through the window.
Yes.
Yeah, and then, but yes, I did notice that. But I think, was she meant to have been shot by arrows? Because obviously it was foreshadowed, wasn't it?
When so.
Ned, when Ned shot at her with an arrow, would have made sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry. Anyway, Nathan, do you want to?
I was just I love those little hypothetical Friday the 13th questions, but it's a really good movie. Obviously great effects and very influential. How many movies tried to copy Friday the 13th successfully and unsuccessfully.
Yeah, indeed.
And that's all I got to say about it for now.
Okay, Joseph, what do you have to say?
Well, I mean, what can you say? This movie's been dissected to death. No pun intended. But yeah, Friday the 13th is a really good film. Like Nathan, I prefer part 2. I think it's scarier and certainly a lot more entertaining. But the first one, it is a roller coaster. It's got great, special effects. I like the characters. I love, the setting. I mean, it does kind of ape Mario Bava's Bay of Blood, but so what? I mean, films ape films all the time. If you do it successfully, then more power to you. I have a problem with Miss Voorhees being the killer. Not so much her performance, which is great, and I love Betsy Palmer, but the fact that it is a cheat. I mean, I have a problem with films that reveal someone to be the killer, but they never have them, earlier in the film. I mean, and especially when they hide the identity of the killer throughout the film, you don't see, you don't even really get a glimpse of the killer much in Friday the 13th. So if it wasn't going to be a whodunit, then why hide their identity? Why not just have her be a complete raving psychotic throughout the whole film? That probably would have been a lot better. I mean, you'd had more time to spend with her, but that's a minor quibble. The film itself is, like you said. I mean, what else can I say? You've both covered it. I mean, it's suspenseful. It's really atmospheric. It has a lot of good character moments, and I have a hypothetical question as well. You're talking about Steve Christie being this kind of ladies' man. Do any of you think for a moment that he might have at one time slept with Mrs. Voorhees? Because during the scene where she finds him out in the rain, he says, "What are you doing out in this mess?" Listen to his inflection when he goes, "Oh, hi." Like, "Oh, it's you."
sounds really camp.
Yeah, I don't remember being that camp.
It's reinforcing my denim hot pants theory.
Yeah, I wonder if he slept with her. He's like, "Oh, hi. What are you doing out in this mess?" Almost like a "come hither to daddy" kind of thing. So I wonder if he slept with Miss Voorhees.
Yeah, well, I mean, he worked. Well, she said she was an old friend of the Christies, isn't she? So
yeah,
so maybe
old friends do a lot of old things together.
Yeah,
I would think Mrs. Voorhees hadn't had sex since her son died, because she hated sex, right? Didn't she think it was evil?
Well, she needs to get laid.
I was watching one of the supplements on one of the DVDs I have, and it showed pictures of Betsy Palmer when she was probably in her 20s, I'd say, and she was a really stunning-looking woman. So I can imagine Steve Christie giving her one. I don't want to, but I can imagine that it would happen.
Oh, Erik, we don't want to hear about your private fantasies.
His stash tickled her.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Okay. Well, I can't imagine many other podcasts talking about Friday the 13th have gone on to Steve Christie's Flavor Saver, but
Ew. Soup strainer.
Okay. Joseph, you got any other thoughts on the original Friday the 13th?
Yeah, like Erik, the first Friday the 13th film wasn't the first one I saw. The third one was actually the first one I saw. So I knew, Jason was going to pop out of the water at the very end, and it kind of killed the suspense, I guess it was. But even still, that is a very, very effective shock scene. I mean, it's kind of got that whole Carrie thing going on there. And I like the music. The music is the perfect leading up to the credits. Like, okay, she just went through this horrible ordeal. She wrote herself out in the boat, and maybe she's mentally unstable. The music's coming up, so here comes the credits. She's going to go through life as kind of unbalanced now because of all these things that happened to her. But the film is over with. Nope, here comes Jason. And it's just a perfect shock. I mean, it's a great way to end the film. But as far as Friday the 13th, yeah, it is a classic for a reason. I mean, it's stood the test of time. It's a great film, and that's pretty much all I've got to say about it for now. So I'll let you go ahead, Justin.
Right. Well, I mean, I've never hidden my love for Friday the 13th. I saw the film. It was actually, unlike yourselves, I think it was the first film. I'm pretty sure it was the first film in the series I saw, because I still remember watching it with two friends from school, and it must have been about 1982 or 83 on video. But I've always loved it. I personally, I don't think it's as good as film as Halloween. but I do think it's a great film, and it's not given the credit that it's due. I think it's it's great fun. I mean, I think when Steve Miner set out to make the Sean Cunningham set out to make the scariest film ever. I don't think it necessarily achieves that, but what it does achieve is the roller coaster ride that he was talking about. He, I think, famously, obviously, started with Last House on the Left, and he really didn't want to make another Last House on the Left. He wanted to make a popcorn movie, and I think it achieves that brilliantly. It's but also with the kind of like the added bonus of the gore effects. I mean, one thing I did wonder, just as another hypothetical question, was why do you think the film made so much play of the gore effects, but then you have that we talked about some of the deaths basically not being shown, like Ned, and also the death scene of the girl at the beginning, where the screen fades to white. Because I think I've read somewhere that Tom Savini said they never shot her death scene, but then there's a photo, isn't there, of her with her neck cut, screaming. So the other thing that I was kind of I thought was quite interesting was actually, and I've forgotten this because I watched it again this morning, and obviously I've seen the film God knows how many times, dozens and dozens and dozens of times over the years, but I thought it was interesting that the film starts with the point of view of the killer, and the killer going through the cabins where all the children are asleep. And obviously that links back to Jason, and obviously when we find out who the killer is. But I thought that was the original film was the only film in the series that actually played with the potential threat to small children. It wasn't until part 6 where they actually did that explicitly, although no children were killed, were they? But they were certainly menaced by Jason, throughout. So I thought that was quite interesting. Something I don't remember picking up on before. I just think it's a great fun film, and I really like Mrs. Voorhees, Betsy Palmer. It does steal the show, and I've said it before and I say it again. Those kind of teeth like tombstones, and just seeing them when I have seen it on the big screen, and they are so huge, those teeth, and like that moment. I think when she turns, when Alice runs off and she turns, and when she runs out, Alice runs out and greets her. And then she turns and walks towards the house, and she gets this beatific smile, but this massive, like a Cheshire cat grin, and she just walks serenely towards the to the cabins, and I just think it's fantastic. I mean, I think the fight scene between Adrian King and Betsy Palmer is great. It's a little bit hokey because you can see a little bit where they're kind of falling. Betsy falls onto some mattresses and things like that, and but I think Adrian says, isn't she, that it's Betsy did whack her a few times, so it wasn't play acting. There was some sort of violence in there, but great. I mean, I agree about the special effects as well. I think I remember seeing them originally and stopping the video and rewinding it and stopping and rewinding, because the original Friday the 13th was released uncut in the UK at cinema and on video. But funnily enough, with although the Blu-ray looks great, the colours really pop out. It's quite a handsomely shot film, which again it's not given credit for. The special effects, I noticed, for instance, with Annie the hitchhiker at the beginning, when her throat is cut, her throat is a completely different colour, but it's a different colour to her face, and it's a bit like with Evil Dead. When I saw that on Nth Generation video back in the day, the special effects looked horrific and really quite shocking, but when you see it on Blu-ray, you see the kind of the shortcomings of the special effects. Not that it harms the movie, but that's kind of what I noticed. I still think the killing of Marcy is probably the most horrific in the whole series, because that really I said it, I think I said it before, but when I saw Friday the 13th on the screen about 12 years ago on the big screen, and people were laughing at it, but when Marcy gets killed and gets the axe in the face, people screamed and were shocked into silence after that, which I thought was quite telling, because especially the way she slides down the curtain with the axe embedded in her face and her eyes fluttering. It's little touches like that which lift it above the norm, I think. But as far as I have a love affair with part 2 as well. I do agree it's a betterly paced film and scarier, but it doesn't have Mrs. Voorhees in any great amount as like the first film. And to be honest, I find I don't know. I just love Betsy Palmer. She just steals the show completely. And Adrienne King gives has a great go at the final girl and being killing her. I mean, the other thing that shows off in the Blu-ray is when she has her head chopped off, you can see the little what are they, kind of toothpicks sticking out.
Yeah, kind of like matchsticks or something. Yeah,
things like that, which kind of show. But having said that, it's all it's all good. It's all good. It's a film that I could watch endlessly on an endless loop. Also, just going back to what you were saying, Erik, about the Part 5 being very steeped in the time. When you're watching Friday the 13th today and what they're wearing, the clothes they're wearing. Obviously, it's filmed in 1979, sort of late 79, but the films don't. The clothes don't look that dated. I mean, Harry Crosby's shirt he was wearing. I was thinking I saw a shirt like that down H&M a couple of weeks ago. It's not super dated.
No,
which is quite interesting. And I think it was, from what I read, it was shot to be a bit like that. So it wasn't steeped in the kind of the fashions of the time. People weren't going around on roller skates in the film and things like that. So. I think it's still a very, very effective kind of little pot boiler, and it's much, much better than its detractors would have you believe. So, Erik, do you want to take it away? Is there anything else you want to say? Because
no, I think it might be a good time maybe to break and go to our interview with Adrienne King.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, I had the pleasure of chatting with Adrienne King a couple of weeks ago, and here she is, and a lovely lady she is too.
How are you?
Well, I'm Mrs. Voorhees, an old friend of the Christies.
Absolutely delighted to have one of the original Final Girls, Adrienne King, Alice from Friday the 13th, with us. She is a legend, and we're absolutely delighted to have her on the show. So thank you for joining us, Adrienne. How are you doing?
It's my pleasure. I'm doing very, very well. Thank you. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, very good. Very excited to be speaking to you. So we talked about Friday the 13th. I was about 11 when it came out, and I've told this story before, but it was one of the topics at the schoolyard when I was a kid, when I was about 11-year-old kid, and everyone said they'd seen it when it came out on video. And obviously I was too young to see it at the cinema, but a girl told me it was a story about accidents happening on Friday the 13th, and strange things happening, like people driving along the freeway in their car filling up with water and drowning, all these kind of things. And of course it was completely made up. It wasn't that at all. But I remember seeing it on video probably a year or so later and loving it, and I've sort of fell in love with Friday the 13th and the slasher movies, and ever since then. So it's actually one of my formative moments. So I'm absolutely delighted to be talking to you, Adrienne. And we're going to be talking about Friday the 13th. Obviously, we're celebrating it on this show. But you had a very early start in the movies, didn't you? Well, you did a TV movie when you were 5 years old. Is that right?
Actually, it was 8 years old.
8 years old. Okay.
Yeah, but that's still pretty young, because I was totally well aware of what I was doing and wanting to be at that juncture. I actually asked my mom to get back into the business because. We grew up in New York and on Long Island, and my mom was what I call one of those a bit of a stage mom who was bored at home, and so she would drag us in, and my brother and my sister wanted nothing to do with it, but for some reason it appealed to me. And when I got to school age, she pulled me out, and I'd already been bitten, so I can only imagine, it was quite funny because I remember having commercials on air while I was in first grade and second grade that I'd done earlier. They run longer. And so I'd already been kind of regaled in my classroom. It was very interesting as the actress, And so when I was about, I think it was third grade, I said to my mom, I really want to do this again. And she said, well, if you want to do this, we'll do it the right way. And we went and found this incredible acting teacher named Ellis Rabb, and I studied with him and immediately booked the first thing I went out on, which was this huge Hallmark Hall of Fame, Inherit the Wind, which at the time had stars similar to, it was Ed Begley, which is Ed Begley Jr.'s dad, and Melvin Douglas, who was the was the George Clooney of the day, or the big names. And I worked with him and a great producer named George Schaefer. And he actually told me when I was filming it, he said, "I know one day I'll be hearing about you," because we had a month of rehearsal for Inherit the Wind, and I was so involved in it as an actress at that age. I remember crying during the rehearsals, in the courtroom scenes. And George would say to me, "You can save it. You can save it." And I remember saying, "But I don't know how." So I was, it was very, very early on. I was bitten by that bug. But also, since I can remember, I've always painted. So I've been very much blessed with two passions that, when one's not working, the other one is.
Mm-hmm. Well, so I mean, I went to art college as well, so that's kind of, it's one of something you've got in common, I kind of guess.
Yes.
Yeah. So, but you went on to, because obviously your film career sort of continued, and Erik wanted me to ask about if you met John Travolta on the set of Saturday Night Fever. Did you?
Not only met him, but danced with them.
Really? Oh, wow. Okay, excellent.
Oh, well, I was in all the dancing scenes, every single one of them. So I was, all the dancers were probably there for at least 4 weeks shooting. And it was incredible because he was there all the time. He was going through a bad patch at the time, though. His fiancée was dying of cancer. So he was not in the best of spirits, but being the pro that he was, he rose to the occasion, and he was lovely. He was absolutely lovely. And it was very funny back in the day when I auditioned for it. It was all Brooklyn, so I was the only blonde that was actually, chosen from the group of dancers. And we had danced the night before at Studio 54. A bunch of friends of mine, we had decided it was an open call, and we decided to go audition for Saturday Night Fever. At that time, it wasn't called Saturday Night Fever; it was just called Saturday Night. And I actually have a T-shirt with the emblem that they gave to some of the dancers that says Saturday Night. So I actually have that T-shirt, from before it was called Saturday Night Fever. And we auditioned right after. We didn't even go home and shower. We went from Studio 54, walked down to Broadway to the audition hall. And we were the first ones online because we were there, obviously, before the sun rose. And so needless to say, it was quite a shock to me that I got chosen, but there were, right back then, not everyone knew how to do the hustle. And so we were totally into it. We had our routines down and we just blew them away. So a bunch of friends and I booked it, and we had such a great time.
It must have been amazing, especially Studio 54 at that time. It was...
it was happening. It was totally happening. But we shot it in Brooklyn at a place called 2001 Odyssey. And SAG, Screen Actors Guild, didn't have a whole lot of rules back then. And so they would have smoke machines going full blast to create that effect. And by the time we had all the dancers, and the way we got down there, nowadays they have buses and they'd probably take us, but we all rode the subway from New York City out to Brooklyn together. But afterwards, we came home, most of us still danced in part of our disco outfits, and would be peeling the smoke layers off of our face because that's how much smoke was poured in during the course of the day and night shooting.
So not just too glamorous.
Layers of...
Wow.
Hi, Richie. I'm on Skype. I'm talking to Justin in Bristol. My husband just waved in the window.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, at least it wasn't Jason, so that's good.
No, it wasn't Jason.
Because I was thinking, obviously, with moving on to Friday the 13th, but obviously with Jamie Lee Curtis was obviously your contemporary, I kind of guess. And in 1980, she was also in Prom Night, wasn't she, throwing disco moves in that?
Yep,
so I just wondered, you might have been good in that role. Do you think you could have thrown some shapes around the floor, couldn't you?
Yeah, I could have done that. That was around the time, though, that I had my stalker. And so needless to say, things took a turn for the worst after Friday the 13th opened. And Actually, I had a moment at one of the clubs where the stalker was there, but we didn't know it at the time until we got a photograph the morning after. There was a photograph produced where the guy had a Polaroid and had been sent under my door. So that's when we knew he was even stalking me at the discos. Yeah.
It's quite very scary, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a weird time in my life. So I couldn't focus on more films, unfortunately. And that's why there's just that little bit of me in part 2 at the top, actually.
Well, just because I was going to say, we're going to talk about your artwork a little bit more a little bit later, but I saw one of them I think it's called The Stalker, isn't it? So is it quite, and a lot of your artwork's kind of informed by Friday the 13th, isn't it? Your time doing those movies. Was it quite cathartic for you? Is that why you go back to that?
You got it, Justin. That's exactly what it was. Back then, it was very, very different. The authorities didn't take it seriously. There were no stalking laws until poor Rebecca Schaefer was killed in 1986. But I have friends of mine that were, Teresa Saldana actually was attacked by her stalker in 1982. And it took someone actually dying before getting killed by their stalker for them to change laws. So for almost a year, a little bit more than a year, on and off, I was stalked, and no one was taking it very seriously, because at that point they say you have to actually be physically hurt for them to pay attention to it. And obviously, that didn't bode well for me. So I kind of closed down a little bit, because I was getting very nasty, nasty things were going on in my life, and we didn't know who the stalker was. It's one thing if you know who your stalker is, but if you don't, it's another whole deal. And for the longest time, I had no clue who it was. So it's very unnerving. And there was no therapy back then, really. No one talked about it. My agent at the time told me to be very quiet. Mum's the word, as everyone said, because they're going to think, that you're just not handling it well. Everybody has these problems, but you know what? Everyone didn't have those problems. It was a whole different ball game back then. And I turned to my canvas. I turned to my painting as an outlet, because there was really no one I could talk to. My mother said talk to the priest, but I just didn't think the priest was going to get a handle on it,
No, well, it must have been very, very scary. Very scary.
It was nasty, and it was psychologically worst thing that I could wish upon anyone, because there was nowhere to turn to. There really wasn't. There was no entourage back then. There were no cameras in the hallways, there wasn't even Star 69. No one had cell phones. So you were basically on your own. And eventually that, it ended, but it took its toll. And so my art was my therapy, and also London was my therapy. I was accepted by the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in 1984 to do they had a summer program there. And I was able to come over a few months early and stay a few months later. And it really it gave me a place to run and hide to. And I tell you, I love you, bloody Brits. You're bloody brilliant, and you were my saving grace, because I'm first generation American. All my relatives, and my mom was born in Liverpool, and everybody was back north. I visited a bunch of relatives up near County Durham. I had a lot of relatives up there, so I felt very safe in London, and I got back into, I played Desdemona on the Van Brugge stage. I got back into what was real to me, because I'd studied with such great people. And then Friday the 13th came and just shook me up so badly. And then between my art and going to to RADA and having such a joyous experience in London, it took 4 years, but I was able to put myself back together.
Because I know Neve Campbell, who obviously was starred in Scream, she lives in London, doesn't she? And I think she says that she doesn't get recognised as much in London, because people don't expect to see Neve Campbell, and it's probably, so I can imagine that would be a good place to sort of hide, and also to get into the Royal Academy is very prestigious. I didn't go anywhere nearly as prestigious as that, so I'm a bit jealous.
It was truly fabulous, Justin. It really, it was one of my best times looking back over my joyous times in my life. It really brought me back up to where I needed to get to start back in again. And that's what I did. I came back to the States. So I had my dark art going for a good solid 4 years, and some of it was so dark, my mother literally took it and threw it down the incinerator. So really? Wow. I've only got what I salvaged of it, and that's called my dark art. Now I play around in dark art only because my fans like it, but I paint a lot of lovely scenes. I paint where I am. I'm bringing paintings from Antarctica that I painted after my trip to Antarctica of penguins, and I, because I paint where I am. So I've got my dark art, but I've got some lovely light art as well.
Excellent, because you're going to be in London, aren't you, pretty soon? Is that April the 21st at the Misty Moon Gallery, Ladywell Tavern in London? So you're looking forward to coming back to Blighty? Yes, I am so excited. It's called The Return because I was there in September, and Stuart Morris and his wonderfully gorgeous wife, Jen, came up with this bloody brilliant idea of bringing my art over there. And they asked me, and I sent some, and it went beautifully. This was a year before that. And then we spoke on, we Skyped and spoke on the phone, and Stuart and Jen said, well, why don't you come on over with your paintings? And I said, that would be a great idea. And we said, well, why don't we also play the movie? And I don't think we gave it enough marketing because I don't think anyone really thought I was going to come over. Right. But we had a great turnout anyway. So this time we decided, okay, we'll put it out there and we'll let everybody know I'm coming this time, and we'll play part 1 and part 2 and maybe something from my new movie Psychic Experiment, which was released in the States, which is kind of fun. That's with Reggie Bannister and Debbie Rochon and Glenn Morshower and a huge list of characters. And it's a real fun, crazy sci-fi horror movie. So I figured we could play a little bit of that and watch the movie together, which is, to me, the best thing I've ever done. Is I've done it 5 times now, is to watch my movie with the fans, because it's just a different experience. And I don't watch it at home. I don't watch it by myself. Yeah. But after 30 years, it's incredible. Well, it's even more now. My God, it's getting up there, isn't it? We're past 30 years, and the fans are still loving it, and now we're into 3 generations of fans. I know, it's just amazing, isn't it? Amazing. And beyond that, to find out that I have so many incredible fans in the UK, that was my mind blower. But with Facebook, all that's changed, and everybody's getting to know everybody else. Of course. Well, they've just in London a few months ago, they played parts 1 to 4 back to back, and they're now doing I think 1 till 8 all 8 movies in an all-nighter in a London cinema. So it shows how the longevity of the films, that people still love them. I mean, I got to see the film, the original film, probably about 10-15 years ago at an art house cinema where they showed revival films, and the funny thing was, I've spoken about this before, it was how people started laughing at it, because obviously with the older films they get a little bit, not campy, but people think they're a bit funny. But then actually when it started getting quite scary and violent and Tom Savini's gore effects started happening, people were quite shocked by it. And so it was, and also I think in the UK the original film was released uncut, whereas in America it was trimmed a little bit. So it had, it's had a special resonance, in the UK. And I mean, just going back to the original film, had you seen Halloween before you did Friday the 13th? Do you remember? I'm not sure if I had or not. I might not have, and I'll tell you why. Because after The Exorcist... Okay, yeah. I've heard this before. I've heard this from a few people before, so yeah. It kind of did me in, which is kind of funny, because now I watch it and I go, seriously, those special effects are so silly. Yeah. But,
at the time, I had a boyfriend down at Georgetown University where it's all set. And, it scared the bejesus out of me, I'll tell you. So I might have sworn off of horror films until I actually did Friday the 13th, I'm thinking. But then, of course, afterwards, I caught up.
Because it was the blueprint. It was, I mean, certainly with Jamie Lee Curtis and yourself in Friday the 13th, it's starting out as the innocent, and obviously you're in Friday the 13th. Was it your idea to be like the artist, sort of, to have that in that film, and in Friday the 13th Part 2, where the beginning where you're drawing? Was that your idea?
You know, I don't think it was, but the artist became more of the character. Yeah. I think she was referred to as an artist, but all of a sudden, you know, like, I was always sketching when I was, when we had downtime. I was sitting up on the lifeguard, the lifeguard chair, while Kevin Bacon and Harry Crosby and Nettie, Mark Nelson, were doing their little push-ups to bulk up before the scene, which is so funny when you see how young and cute they are now. And oh my gosh, when you look back on that. And so I think they incorporated a lot more of the artwork into her character. But Victor Miller is the first one to say that he totally robbed the concept from Halloween about, you know, the innocent and the final girl and the whole thing. Although no one referred to us as final girls until recently, I think.
That's right. I mean, I was interested in because one of the things I'd quite like to do, because I've written this book about the kind of history of the slasher movie, and I'm really keen to do a book actually on final girls and the idea of, you know, that whole idea of kind of, basically the mix-up between the kind of the violence in the movie and the violence against women was a very hot topic at the time, wasn't it? But then you had very strong female characters and that whole idea and sort of. So what was I suppose at the time, because I guess it was much more innocent, wasn't there, back then, wasn't it? Because these films were still in their infancy. But did you think about your role when you were doing it? Did you think it was trailblazing, or like you say, you didn't really think of yourself as a final girl? But you know, how did you view your character then, and how do you view her now?
I think the one word that sums it up, and if I ever write a book, which someday I have to, because people keep on insisting to write a book about everything that happened with the stalker and the movie, and then my artwork that went along with it. The one word is survivor, and I think my book is going to be called Survival Skills.
Okay.
Because survival, all during life, one needs survival skills, and in that movie, I identified with Alice so much, because the one thing I've always thought of myself is a survivor, and I've been tested many, many times, and someday we'll go into that, but survivor, in terms of Alice and in terms of the Jamie Lee Curtis, I totally related to that on a very personal level, because when I was going to school in high school, women's lib was in its heyday. I mean, it was like, I was the first girl who ever took automobile mechanics. I took auto mechanics in high school just because they said I couldn't.
Okay, yeah.
I don't care about learning how to change my oil. I didn't care anything about it. It was just the fact that they said no girls allowed. In 10th grade, I said, I'm going to do it, and I did it just to, you know, pave a way. It was, you know, and I used to do crazy things like, just to prove, you know, we weren't supposed to wear pants in school, right? Well, of course, I had to make pants that looked like a skirt that, you know, that I could get away with. And eventually I had all the girls wearing pants and to school, you know, and I'd embroider the flowers up my jeans so I could say they weren't just jeans. They were a piece of art, and I was wearing a piece of art. So, yes, I totally was. I bought the whole women's lib, you know, rah-rah. And I thought that this was part of that. I thought this is, as far as I knew, because, like I said, I don't think I knew about Halloween, but I don't think up to that point I had seen it. And I honestly felt very much like this is the way it should be done. A woman could totally figure this one out. She could get tough. She could get strong, use her brains. And so I totally felt so connected to Alice that she was that we were one and the same. You know, when we did that fight scene on the beach, Justin, it was and Betsy Palmer, God love her. I mean, she brought I always say she brought my game all the way up. Could not have asked for anyone else better to have worked against than Betsy. But when we were on that beach fighting it out, and that was all real. You know, that was, and I kept on going, oh my God, be careful what you ask for, because here I am fighting for my life, and it's like, it's real, and it's all about survival. So I think that's the word.
Survival. Okay, excellent. And one of the things that people say when you're making a film, you're not seeing, you might have an idea in your head how it's going to look. But did you have any idea, you know, when you saw it, the finished product, I mean, were you surprised at it? I mean, was it what you thought it was going to be? Do you remember seeing it for the first time?
I remember Sean Cunningham, the director, was very, very gracious with me as an actress, knowing that I was going to carry this movie. He let me see my dailies, which was huge. A lot of directors don't. And it helped me a lot. It really did help me in terms of confidence-wise, to see what I was doing on the screen. And then when he felt like I was comfortable, you know, he wouldn't show me if he knew that I had what I needed, you know. But so I did get a sense of what was going on, but that was only in the first couple of weeks. Once we started getting down and dirty, I didn't even care about looking at him. You know, it was just like, now we're ready to rock and roll. So when he had screenings for buyers, because as you well know, it was a little independent movie. It was not a big, like the rest of them, a big, you know, Paramount pick or New Line or whatever. This was a baby little independent. So I got to see, you know, in the screenings once. Then I got to bring my mother once. And that's the story I tell on Bravo, where my mom jumps at the ending like 25 feet in the air.
You didn't warn her.
Have you seen that interview on Bravo?
No, you didn't warn her that it was coming, did you? Haven't seen that,
no,
so I'd be interested. You tell the story.
Not. I was, you know, I figured this would be the time to get her back. Okay. You know, but it was, I turned around after she jumped, and she has a scream, and I knew genetically at that moment where I'd gotten it from. And I turned around, and there was Sean shaking hands with, I can only imagine, the head of Paramount and the head of Warner Brothers, because they were very happy. And so I knew what was coming, and then I saw it with on Broadway opening night with a packed house. And at the ending, they literally had, and it had nothing to do with any kind of, you know, any kind of forethought. They had an ambulance there because some guy had a heart attack or something at the ending. Wow. Okay. So needless to say, there was lines around around the block for all that summer in 1980 in New York. I remember that. And you were too young to remember that.
Well, I remember, it's one of the films, I remember seeing the poster outside the cinema and really, really wanting to see it. And unfortunately I was too young. But I did see it on video, and I don't know if you know, the British video cover is actually of you in the boat at the end. Have you ever seen that? It's the one with you.
I told you the Brits had so much better taste, don't they?
Well, it was a photo. It's the Warner Brothers, because it was released by Warner Brothers in the UK, and that's why it was uncut, I think, or part of the reason. But yeah, it was. I remember seeing that in the video shops, and it was the the famous photograph of you lying with your hand in the water just before Jason jumps out.
And then I had my Alice in Canoe painting.
Yes, exactly. It was that image, exactly. So
I'm going to bring the original with me to London, to the Misty Moon Gallery, the original. Okay. And I have one of the original Jason masks are going to be there as well.
Wow. Okay.
And then I have a painting of Camp Crystal Lake I'm bringing over, circa 1979.
Wow.
So you'll get it's from sketches I'd done while I was there.
Yeah.
And photographs. And so when I was resurrected by my fans some 8 or 9 years ago, because the story is that I had no clue this was going on outside. Because because, when I was resurrected by my fans, I went through, and we moved up here. I had my own art studio. So I opened up this box that had been taped up for 25 years and found all these things from Friday the 13th, including like 30 Polaroids of my own, which I have now, which I will bring with me to show, because this is my way of thanking my British fans for being so loyal to me and so gracious and welcoming me there in 84 and back again, last year and now again. I just feel like I'm family over there. So I'm bringing all my goodies, including the original notes from that night on the beach, that fight scene.
Yeah.
I have Sean Cunningham's original 13 notes.
Wow.
13 notes that he had scribbled on 2 pages of steno, coffee stains, and when the sun was coming up and we'd shot all night long, and when I tell you, both of us were battered and bruised and a little bloody, Sean took those 2 pieces of paper, which had notes that say Tom Savini this, Betsy this, Adrian this, and crumpled them and threw them away with the Polaroids, being an artist, Justin.
Yes.
I went in there, got them, put them in my jeans pocket, which I totally forgot about. But because I'm thinking collage, if the movie never opens, I'll make a collage,
Yeah.
And because at that time, with a little low budget, you don't know if you're even going to finish it. And so I found these notes and I made a poster, and I'm bringing those posters over too. Fantastic. And it has the original 13 notes with it's a 16 by 20 poster with 2 pictures. If you go on my website, you'll see it. So I'm bringing those with me as well.
Actually, yeah, I saw it on there. Do you want to remind people what your website is as well, so they can go and visit?
That'd be great. It's adrienneking.com, which is ADRIENNE King, King. But also Misty Moon Gallery. I think it's mistymoon.net. Oh gosh, Stuart's going to kill me for this one. Maybe you can look it up for me, Justin.
What I'll do is I'll look it up and I'll mention it on the show.
Thank you, because they also have a link to my website. And also, even though I can't ship wines over to England, if you go onto crystallakewines.com, there's these cute commercial movies that filmmakers from New York and professional filmmakers have made on their own dime, called Back to the Lake. And it's Back to the Lake Part 1 and Part 2 with my wines featured. And I do this cute little commercial, and so the fans might just like to watch those. They're fun.
Well, I might pick one up next time I'm over in the States. But that sounds great.
I wish I could send them.
Yeah, well, I say put one on ice for me. We'll have a glass together at some point, so we could. Just asking. I was curious actually about the. Just going back to Friday the 13th quickly. The film had such a good reception with fans and audiences, and obviously it's a massive moneymaker for Paramount. Yeah. But critically, it was hated, wasn't it? Famously by Ebert and Siskel and Ebert. And do you remember that? And do you remember being stung by that, or did you just brush that off?
I have the original reviews. I have the New York Times still to this day. I'll bring them. If you're going to show up, I will show you. And they panned it. They said we were gorgeous, nubile teenagers, which I love. Thank you very much. Yes. But the movie it would never last a weekend. It would never last.
What do critics know?
And Ebert sent Betsy Palmer a scathing letter about how dare she take herself and being the brilliant actress she was to such a horrible level. Well, Betsy was very, very hurt by this. Now she laughs about it. God love her. She totally embraces the fact that she is Mrs. Voorhees.
Yeah. Well,
now, but they hated the movie and they swore it would never last.
Yeah, well, what do critics know? Very little. So
very little, right?
Very little. Just talking very quickly about the sequel. Were you? I mean, you talked about the difficult time with stalking, and presumably that was in between the films. Did Sean ask you to come back in a larger role for the sequel? Was that original idea? Was it always the idea for you to come back to sort of cameo at the beginning?
Yeah. Well, what happened was, immediately, like boom, they knew after Friday night opening that there was a sequel.
Okay.
So Paramount had already been working on it. I'm thinking probably, I don't have all of the, I was not privy to this information, but I've kind of put it together because I met with Steve Miner and I'd spoken to Sean a few times, and essentially what they had left, they were trying to work with because they needed a monster. They needed the bad boogeyman, and so they had to come up with something. And needless to say, a paper bag was the best they could do for a while. And the top 20 minutes originally were supposed to be open ended, and so that if they needed me to come back, I would come back. I told them I would do anything I needed to do. I just couldn't focus on the film the way I needed to focus as an actress because my life was in shambles with the stalker thing, and my agent agreed it wasn't the timing wasn't quite right. So essentially, we came up with what we thought was the best idea to leave it open-ended, and it was supposed to be a dream within a dream. But if they didn't need me after it, and it worked out that Jason was the perfect, villain. And so as far as Alice was concerned, she was dead. And that, it was cool. It was all good because at the time I still wasn't looking to come back and do any films. It wasn't until after I came back in 1984 that I started looking on camera, and I got a part on All My Children, which I was thrilled about when I tested for it and screen tested for it. And then I went to do it, and I was standing in the wings and felt my heart beating through my chest like this, and that's when I knew I couldn't do on camera. And that's when my agent said, we'll do voiceovers, we'll groom you for voiceovers. And then I had 20 good years of voiceovers.
Because you worked You worked on big films, didn't you? Sort of Titanic and Jerry Maguire.
Yeah, I've done over 100 films doing my voices from a baby to a grandmother and dialects and you name it. And it was a wonderful little niche for me. I enjoyed doing it. But it wasn't until I started on camera just a few years ago that I realized how much fun I really had, how much I had suppressed in terms of just letting the whole body and soul get involved, So I've had a little bit of fun doing some cameos recently, but I would say part 2 kind of was just, we'll see what happens, to answer your question. And I think we saw what happens,
Okay, Erik did ask me to ask you if that was a real cat thrown through the window, if you remember.
Oh, gosh, yes. It was all real. Okay. It was all absolutely, everything was real back then. Even the ice pick through my face, it was supposed to be retractable, but the props man forgot to check. And so when they actually did the first one, it did not retract. So even the ice pick was real. Yeah, I had a little hole they had to aim for the second take.
Oh, wow. Well, that could have been would have been a very messy end
that could
to
have
Alice,
been the real demise of Alice.
Yes, that would have been the real demise of Alice. And am I right in thinking you got offered, originally, they were thinking about inviting you back to cameo in the remake in 2009. Is that right? Can you tell a little bit about that?
It's true. It's true. And Betsy and I were both approached because we had the same manager at the time for conventions, and I wasn't even doing films at the time. And they said, would she be interested? And so we both said, sure. And then they said, you know what? About a week later, we decided we don't want anybody from the old one. We want to make it all new. And we went, too bad. But between you and me, now that I've seen the new one.
Yes, yeah. Yes, well, it's probably just as well.
I'm kind of happy it worked out the way it did.
Did they? I mean, did they say? Was that as far as they got? They just came to you then say what they would like you to do. You and Betsy, what they want you to do. No, it'd have been interesting to see what they.
Justin, it's amazing how many fan-based scripts there are, and I'm sure you've seen it if you've been on my Facebook. Mm-hmm. There are so many people who want the final girls to come back and get Jason, or Alice to come back and Jason, and maybe one of these days the studios will say, let's just try and see what happens. But they don't listen to the fans, so,
It's funny, isn't it? You would think they would, wouldn't you? But, yeah.
You think they would, especially, gosh, the Friday the 13th fans are so diehard. Yeah. They just go to the box office and pray for something that they want to see. Or when they reissue a new DVD set, it's like, please let there be something new there instead of just squishing out, squeezing out maybe another, 1 second of something they found. But
well, that's, I mean, I know.
I wish they would fulfill the Friday the 13th fans' dreams just so they could be happy.
One day that we've, it has worked in the past with My Bloody Valentine, which is another film that came out in 1981. That was cut very heavily, and then through fans, the pressure of saying, start a campaign to get it released, and it eventually got released uncut by Lionsgate a few years ago. So things do happen. So maybe we should all get together, because I had an idea, which I'm sure is not original, is to get all the final girls back together in the camp for survivors, and then have Jason turn up and the final girls having to teach a new crop of teenagers how to survive, because it's just things like that would just be fun, wouldn't they?
Absolutely. And maybe that's why they don't want to do it. Maybe it would be too much fun, and not scary enough.
Well, that's the trouble. I think with a lot of people think horror movies and now aren't fun, and they were fun back then, weren't they? They were scary. They were fun.
That's why everybody enjoyed them. Now I can't even watch a horror movie. I mean, I can't. I walked out of the Saw movie. I'm sorry. I just that I can't do that kind of torture. Horror. Yeah. So that stuff is a little unnerving to me personally. I love the roller coaster of horror movies. I just love a good old-fashioned horror movie. I love catching up on the ones I've missed. The thing is, with Friday the 13th, Justin, there was no extra footage. Everything they shot was used. I mean, the extra seconds you got, I think, was the Mrs. Voorhees' head rolling down the beach. I think that was an extra 7 seconds. I mean, literally, there was nothing. Every inch of film that they had, because Lord knows they had to save up for every piece of it. When we did that last scene in the movie, we shot it on 3 different times because they had to save up to buy an additional camera each time.
Oh, of course, yeah. I think it was actually it was the sequels, the one that it was very heavily cut, wasn't it? Friday the 13th Part 2 was what got cut very heavily by.
The studio would have a ton more money, more funds to do it. Sure, I'm sure they had tons of extra footage.
And just quickly, I just wanted to ask about your. We touched on your sort of the films you're doing at the moment, but there was one film that sounded. You mentioned about one of the films, The Butterfly Room, which again has a lot of very interesting people in it. It's like PJ Soles, who was in Halloween with Jamie Lee Curtis, Debbie Rochon, Barbara Steele, who was kind of obviously a massive, icon.
Yes, I did a scene with her.
Did you? Wow. Can you tell us a little bit about it? Because on IMDb, there's no details about what the film's actually about.
I know, it's crazy. It's really very disturbing, haunting, wonderful film that reminded me of a little of the 60s Betty Davis Joan Crawford feel to it.
Okay.
But it's essentially about a little girl. Let's see, if I could say, whatever happened to Baby Jane meets the bad seed. That kind of thing. This girl haunts the malls for different mothers. It's very. I mean, she's a real little girl. She's not a ghost. She walks the malls, and so she's a seductress, and she's a nasty little thing, but. It's looking for distribution, and Jonathan Zarantinello, who's an Italian director, wrote to all his screen queens that he grew up with. And the little girl, by the way, is named Alice, so he named her after my character.
Okay.
And so I have a scene with Alice as well as Barbara Steele, and I can't wait for it to get released because it's from what I've seen of it, and I've only seen bits and pieces of it, but with that cast, it's got to be pretty darn good. And it had a decent budget for a low-budget film. I think it was over $1 million, so the production quality is quite good. So hopefully it'll find a distributor.
Well, I hope so, because it's also got like James Caren, Ray Wise, and Camille Keaton as well. So it's kind of got the dream cast, really, isn't it?
It does. So I don't know what's holding it up, but I hope it'll be out soon because it's very clever, very, very clever and nasty and creepy. I like creepy, I like psychological horror movies. Those are my favorite, especially when it's not my brain being messed with personally.
Yeah, fair enough. So, I mean, just won't keep you for much longer, but just talk a little bit about your kind of return to the horror circuit, as in the horror conventions, because Joseph and Nathan, who are on the podcast with me and Erik, they met you at where did they meet you? It was one at Monster Mania last June, and you were kind enough to give us an intro for the film. Yes, I think so. Yeah, so they said to say hi. How have you found those?
Hello. Yes, it was so much fun, and I don't do very many of the conventions. I don't like to burden my fans with too much of me, but I'm doing one. I did the Friday the 13th reunion in Baltimore last year, which is great because then I get to see all my Friday the 13th fans. And then this year I'm doing one in Chicago. So as you can see, it's not that many. I'm doing one in Chicago. It's called Flashback Weekend, and it's in August. And so that's the convention so far this year. I promised my husband I would stay home more because last year I actually spent a month in Portland filming a movie that I'm actually producing as well called Interviews with Aunt Gabby. And it's not a horror film, but it's about an ensemble of family members who are brought back because their aunt is dying and she needs to reacquaint herself. So all the relatives come out of the woodwork and meet up who haven't seen each other for the past 10 years. And you can only imagine what horrors that brings. So that's the one. That's that one. And then I have another one that's winning tons of awards called The Innocent. Okay. It's going through the film festivals, and that is about teenage bullying and internet bullying, and I play a high school principal, and it's been getting awards, and it's very timely, so hopefully that'll get a distributor. But, that's the thing about low budget films. You try it. I found these scripts, and I believed in the people who are doing them, so I try to get them to the next level if I can. I'm in my genre, I'm so I try to help where I can. In the other genres, I can't do any good. But in the horror genre, I can help filmmakers. And that's what I try to do if I find a good script.
Yeah, well, no, fantastic. I mean, I don't want to take up any more of your time, Adrienne, because you've been an absolute star. And I'm sure people actually love listening to this. Before you go, is there any message you'd like to say to well, actually, we've got a lot of listeners all around the world, actually Australia and the United States and the UK and, I mean, maybe even Hong Kong, I don't know. So you're worldwide.
Wonderful. Go to Hong Kong sometime. Yeah. Well, this is the thing. Friday the 13th has just, who would have thought that, except for John Travolta, who we were talking about, could make a comeback at this stage of the game. And especially a female. And so I have to thank all my bloody brilliant Friday the 13th fans globally, especially the UK fans, though, because they've always been there for me. But globally now on Facebook, I have fans all over the world. Australia's a lot of fans in Australia. And I just want to truly thank them for giving me the opportunity to be present again, to be in the forefront, and to enjoy what I missed the first time around. The fans have really healed a little hole in my heart because I didn't get to play the first time. I didn't get to enjoy all the success of the Friday the 13th. So thank God it stuck around this long to give me a chance to enjoy it. And I'm so bloody grateful, is all I can say.
Well, we're bloody grateful to have you with us. So, and thank you ever so much, Adrienne. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I shall try my damnedest to come up and see you in London in April. And hopefully anyone listening will come along as well. And
absolutely. A special invitation to anyone there listening. You come down to Ladywell. We'll watch the movie together and you get the camper's hug.
Okay. That sounds like an invitation no one can turn down. So thank you, Adrienne. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Have a good one.
Yeah, and you too. Thank you.
Did you know that a young boy drowned the year before those two others were killed? The counselors weren't paying any attention. They were making love while that young boy drowned.
Hi, this is Russell Todd from Chopping Mall, He Knows You're Alone, and Friday the 13th Part 2, and you're listening to The Hysteria Continues.
That was the lovely Adrienne King, aka Alice, from Friday the 13th. And she did mention she's coming to London on April 21st, and I'm going to be there. They're going to show the first 2 Friday the 13th films on a relatively big screen. It's not cinema, it's an art gallery, so I'm not expecting sort of a big cinema multiplex screen. But you're going to get to see, her artwork as well, and hopefully meet the lovely Adrienne, who I believe you have mentioned actually that both of you have met Nathan and Joseph, yeah? Last summer?
Yeah, she's a very lovely person. And when you meet people at conventions, they try to hurry so, when people are in line so they can get to the next person. But, I mean, not her. I mean, we talked to her for at least 15 minutes. I mean,
cool.
She was a talker. And she's great. I loved her.
Yeah, the event, the April 21st event, it's apparently sold out, so I'm expecting probably a lot of people to be there. But the exhibition is open from the 17th to the 23rd of April if anyone wants just to go see the paintings. But if you want to meet Adrienne herself, I think the tickets are sold out. But if you go to the Misty Moon Gallery website, I'm sure you'll get more information.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Okay, I haven't got tickets myself. I don't think I can make it, but now I won't be able to make it, so I'm going to be ashamed.
Yeah.
So,
oh well, you got to talk to her though, at least.
Talk to her, yes. But yeah, it's definitely worth going along. And a lot of her Friday the 13th inspired work is going to be there, isn't it? So it's going to be definitely, a good event. So do you want to? We'll talk a little bit about background for the film. Erik,
yeah,
you got some stuff for us?
Yeah, I have a few things. I won't go too much into sort of the background detail that everyone probably knows already. I'm going to try to avoid that, but just to say that it famously was an advert before it was even a script in a July 1979 issue of Variety magazine. And the filmmakers, obviously, Victor Miller is the first to admit he wrote the screenplay that he went to Halloween, for a source of inspiration for the film. Sean Cunningham had made a number of films before this. The 2 immediately pre-Friday were family comedy dramas, and I think I mentioned one of them a few podcasts ago called Manny's Orphans that I watched, and it was completely unremarkable, and it certainly was unremarkable in terms of box office as well. So he was really in need of a hit. So this is why he turned to horror. So according to Crystal Lake Memories, the fantastic book by Peter Bracke that came out a few months ago, actually, while I'm talking about Crystal Lake Memories, just to let people know that there's a revised edition coming out as an ebook. Actually, I think it's out already, and it's an enhanced book. So if you have a fancy new swanky iPad 3 or whatever it's called, what you get is sort of new pictures and videos. Also, there's a lot of new text content, apparently featuring interviews with people he didn't get around to talking to the first time around. I think that is the text version is out already, but the enhanced version was slightly delayed. So that's coming out, I think, later this month or perhaps in April. So keep your eyes out for that. I don't know if it's going to affect me because it's only as it's an ebook. I don't think I can download it in Ireland. I think it's a US only release at the moment anyway. Back to Crystal Lake Memories, George Mansour, who was involved in Georgetown Productions, who are the company who bankrolled Friday the 13th, he claims that the people who made the 1979 film Friday the 13th, The Orphan, threatened to sue, although he's unsure about how the matter was resolved eventually in the end. The original title, actually, for the film, and one of the script drafts that's available online, is Long Night at Camp Blood. And possible actors who came close to being in the film, or were considered at one stage, were Sally Field for the role of Alice, and Estelle Parsons was approached to play Mrs. Voorhees. Also, at this point, I should point out that Justin from the podcast here and Susie Sue, his heroine, were originally cast in the film, and they'd actually did a screen test. Do you have the audio I managed to...
Unfortunately, I do have the audio. Here it is.
It is.
All right, Susie. Do you think there'll be other gorgeous goths at Camp Crystal Lake besides yourself?
Are graveyards all you ever think about, Justin?
Oh, no, absolutely not. Sometimes I just think about kissing tombstones.
Well, Justin, you kept that a secret.
I know, but it was back when I was pretending to be Australian, by the sound of it.
Hey, I'm insulted. Anyway,
Jesus Christ.
Well, actually,
yeah, well, people don't know that you actually are Australian, so there. Anyway, production began on the 4th September 1979 in rural Blairstown and Hope, New Jersey. The campsite itself is a location called Camp Novi Bosco, and the filming lasts there for 28 days. Now, one of my favourite scenes, I neglected to mention this before, was the scene where Kevin Bacon as Jack and Ron Milkay, I think it's pronounced, as Officer Dorff, have a conversation about drugs. And he says the classic line, "Colombian gold, man, grass, hash, the weed, dig it." Apparently all that sequence was improvised.
Oh, really?
Which, yeah. Sean Cunningham was saying how impressed he was with Kevin Bacon's work. Maybe that's the indication that I didn't pick up on, that Kevin Bacon was going to become a big star. The film opened on May the 9th of 1980. 2 weeks before, this is to put into context for people, it opened 2 weeks before Empire Strikes Back and The Shining, which makes me feel very old indeed, because I was there on the opening day of Empire Strikes Back. It cost just around $500,000 to make and generated about $40 million at the box office, which, according to a wonderful book I have here called Teenage Wasteland by J.A. Kurzweil, that adjusted
that
to
Australian guy,
the famous Australian author. Yes, he adjusted to 2010 money. That's about 122 million, which is a huge profit. I mean, obviously there are films that make much more money than that, but the cost to profit ratio was quite enormous. In the 1980 box office chart, it finished up as number 18 of the year. The big moneymaker that year was, of course, as I said, Empire Strikes Back. Horror-wise, the biggest box office was for The Shining, which was at number 14 on the list. Also there were Dressed to Kill, Prom Night, Motel Hell was number 78. And also one of my favourite films was number 28 that year with a respectable £22 million haul, and that was Xanadu. And listen out for my upcoming podcast on that film. The film received 2 nominations in the inaugural Raspberry Awards, or Razzies. Worst Film, which it didn't win, and Worst Actress for Betsy Palmer, which also she didn't win. Of course, it received a critical mauling from the American critics, in particular Roger Ebert. I think you've got some quotes on this, Justin. Pauline Kael from the New York Times as well. They both hated the film. Famously published Betsy Palmer's address and encouraged people to write to her, saying how appalled they were that she'd appear in such low-grade filming. And in 1979, there was a novel. Did I say 1979? In 1987, there was a novelization by Simon Hawke. Now, he also wrote the novelizations of parts 2 and 6, and also one of the 2 novelizations of part 3. There are a few differences, actually, or a few embellishments in the novelization. One of them is that apparently Marcy kissed like a nuclear reactor melting down.
Wow.
Yeah, that's quite a strong kiss. They also sort of indicate that Jack and Marcy haven't slept together yet, and that the scene where they're going at it hammer and tongs underneath Ned's dead body is their first time. So there we go. Also, in the original opening, Barry and Claudette, who are the names of the 2 councillors in 1958 who get killed at the start. What was supposed to happen there was it was supposed to take place outside, and Claudette was to get an axe to her head. Barry struggles then with Mrs. Voorhees, chopping off her finger before she finally overpowers him, and he falls, hits his head on a rock, and that's what kills him. And Mrs. Voorhees then picks up her severed finger and walks off, and that's where the opening credits were supposed to roll. It also had a slightly different ending, where the cops pull up. They see all the victims from the previous night's atrocities hanging from a tree. And Alice is there sitting underneath the tree with her back to the policemen. She's humming to herself. And as the policemen get towards her, it's revealed that she's gone a bit insane and she's holding Mrs. Voorhees' severed head in her lap. And that was the sort of original ending.
That would have been quite interesting, wouldn't it?
It would. I think it's more interesting to sort of kiss Marcy and see what a nuclear reactor melting down feels like.
Well, indeed, we'll never know now, will we? But yeah.
So, do you have any stuff there, Nathan?
No.
Joseph, do you have anything?
Yeah, I got a couple of things. I mean, it really has nothing to do with. Well, I guess it does. I mean, a lot of people want to know the significance of the actual Friday the 13th, the date. It's actually a phobia. It's called frigatriskaidekaphobia, It's the fear of Friday the 13th.
It sounds a bit rude.
Yeah, it is a bit rude. But basically, it's in numerology, the number 12 was considered the number of completeness. So it's reflected as in the 12 months of the year, the 12 hours of the clock, 12 gods of Olympus, 12 tribes of Israel, 12 apostles of Jesus, the 12 descendants of Muhammad. Whereas the number 13 was considered irregular, transgressing this completeness. There's also a superstition thought by some to derive from the Last Supper or a Norse myth that having 13 people seated at a table will result in the death of one of the diners. So I guess that's kind of a sort of a slasher-esque tie-in with the title in mythology. But that's all I got because I didn't really want to go searching for stuff that's, already been talked about. So I thought I would just kind of clear up the title for those who are still in the dark.
Thank you. Justin, what stuff do you have there? I'm sure you have a wealth of stuff after researching your Australian authored book.
Indeed. Well, I mean, you've covered a lot of the stuff we're going to say because, to be honest, it's if you've got an interest in Friday the 13th, then there's the Crystal Lake Memories, which obviously Eric's already mentioned a couple of times. There's also David Grove's The Making of Friday the 13th, The Legend of Camp Blood, which, again, is a good overview of the films. So, I mean, they're packed to the rafters with everything you ever want to know about Friday the 13th and the sequels. So I'd recommend picking those up. But just a couple of things that you didn't mention, Eric. One of the things I thought was that Jason was originally called Josh. I think Victor Miller decided that Josh didn't sound scary or didn't sound, wasn't really a kind of a name that could be used in any kind of horrific way. So Jason was actually, he gave the name Jason because he was bullied at school by a Jason, and that's apparently, well, whether or not that's true, that's one of the things I read. Eric, you talked about, obviously, he was a box office smash, at the time, and I think you mentioned that 1980 was actually quite a disappointing year at the box office for a lot of films. But the film also did $20 million internationally, which means that the take, adjusted for today's figures, would be something like $156 million on international gross on a budget of $500,000, which is pretty amazing. And Paramount only, I think they paid $1.5 million for the rights. And then they spent another $100,000, sort of $500,000 in adverts for the film, and then another $500,000 when the film started doing well. Now, I found some things from, again, not wanting to repeat stuff that's been repeated time and time and time again. I had a look back at some of the newspaper clippings from that year, and apparently they said that the Friday the 13th, the reason it was so successful was actually it was a film that was not made for television, but was made on television, in so much its success was down to the teaser trailers and the trailers on TV, like a lot of films obviously were trailered on television. But he said that there was a quote here from one of the people behind the publicity, say the TV spots were so good, then the film gave the audience everything television had promised, an exciting film with lots of murders. And obviously the way they were able to do that was presumably with the whole 1, 2 and the kind of the teaser shots, which basically promised horror if you went to too scary for for TV, I can guess. And so that was why it was partly why it's so successful. Mentioned a little bit about Ebert and Pauline Kael hating the film. Gene Siskel also published his review in the Chicago Review Tribune. I think that's the paper anyway, but it's a Chicago paper. He termed it, and I love these things that Siskel and Ebert come up with, these names for these films like Dead Teenager Movie and things like that, which I think are great. I love those terms, but they're obviously using them as a term of hardly endearment. But he called Friday the 13th the meat cleaver in the forehead movie, which is a great way to sell it, And obviously he gave away the ending in his review, and as Eric said, gave the address of the head of Paramount, and also Betsy. He didn't actually give her address, but he said she lives in this small town called whatever it was, and if you write to her, your letter's bound to get to her. But all the reviews were bad. There's a quick, just a little paragraph from the Cedar Rapids Gazette on Monday, 12th of May, 1980. Mike Dupree says, but while Friday the 13th isn't nearly as good a movie as Halloween, whose audience it's trying to get, it saves the best till last. The acting isn't bad, with 2 exceptions, and they both get killed early. However, it's as good a way as any to start the Summer Slaughter sweepstakes. So there was, not all of the critics hated it, but I think a lot of the controversy, because it was one of the first explicit horror movie that was picked up by a major studio. Paramount obviously picked it up, and I think that was the biggest beef I think that Siskel and Ebert had. In some ways, they didn't really care if exploitation movies were playing in drive-ins, but they didn't like the idea that Paramount, this kind of studio that was steeped in legend from, the kind of who'd had huge film stars and all this kind of thing, had lowered themselves, in their words, to releasing this little exploitation horror movie. And of course, Paramount have had a difficult relationship with Friday the 13th and the films. They loved the money they made for them, but they didn't like being associated with them. And that's part of the reason why Friday the 13th fans have been shortchanged. Although there's great DVD and Blu-ray editions of the films, Paramount still won't get their finger out and look for the lost footage, because although they've kind of, from what I've heard, they said they couldn't find it. I've also heard people who are in the business saying that they've offered to go through the Paramount vaults and look for stuff, and Paramount have no interest in that. Also, of course, the violence of the films, Paramount was, although again it was kind of very two-faced, because they made huge amount of money out of it, but they played a part in toning those down later, and also they famously wouldn't release any of the films unrated because it was against their policy. That's what else is there? I mean, I think that's pretty much. Well, apart from the one thing I did in the Selena Journal, 1980, it says that obviously Harry Crosby is Bing Crosby's son, and I read a little article with him saying that when he started the film, they didn't know who his dad was. So he said he wasn't cast because his dad was Bing Crosby, and it wasn't for about 4 or 5 days until the cast and crew realised who he was. Now, whether or not that's true, I don't know, but certainly when we look at the kind of the alumni from the Friday the 13th series, Harry Crosby doesn't seem to be somebody who revels in his past in the Friday the 13th movies. I'm not aware. I don't know if Crystal Lake Memories has actually got any quotes from people like Harry Crosby or Kevin Bacon.
It has one by Kevin Bacon, but right. It sounds like it might have been just a sound bite taken from another source. It's literally only 2 or 3 lines. I don't think there's any Harry Crosby in it though. No. But again, that this could be stuff that's addressed by the new extended edition that's coming out.
It would be interesting, wouldn't it? Because I'd kind of, it's a shame really, but I can see a lot of actors and actresses, they did these kind of films because they didn't have any love for the genre like we do, and they saw them as a stepping stone for other things, and a paying job, and want to distance themselves from the films, which is a real shame. But I mean, that's what I imagine Kevin Bacon sees himself very much a serious actor these days, and he probably sees Friday the 13th as a bit of fluff, but I don't know. But he certainly, it doesn't appear to, from what I can see, have spent any time talking about the film, which I think is a shame. But I mean, that's kind of, I mean, there's like I say, in those 2 books, there's an absolute wealth of trivia, and at risk of repeating everything, what I suggest is getting those, and obviously you look on places like IMDb, which has got a lot more detail on there as well. So so has anyone else got anything you want to add?
Just let people know that David Grove, who wrote that book you were saying, Making Friday the 13th, The Legend of Camp Blood, it was a fab press release. He also wrote the Jamie Lee Curtis biography that I think we've mentioned, about her involvement in slasher films in the late 70s, early 80s. He's bringing out another book this October called On Location in Blairstown, The Making of Friday the 13th. And on this occasion, the whole book is just about the first film, and apparently it promises lots and lots of new, previously unseen photographs, as well as hopefully information.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's Friday the 13th. I'm sure we're going to get onto the sequel before too long, I imagine. But before we get on to, should we get on to feedback?
Just one bit of trivia that I didn't know about until earlier this morning is that Noel Cunningham, who is Sean S. Cunningham's son, and he also went on to produce the wonderful Jason X, he is actually one of the actors in the opening prologue in the 1958 set scene. He's one of the campers sitting around singing about the River Jordan.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
There you go. Oh, and also Walt Gorney, who plays Crazy Ralph. I didn't realize this until earlier. He was also in Trading Places, Day of the Animals, and probably more importantly, he does the opening narration of Part 7, The New Blood.
Ah, okay.
I'm trying to remember who he was in Trading Places. I've seen that movie a million times, and yet I don't remember him in that film.
Yeah, I've seen that film a million times as well, so I'll have to rewatch it. I know why you watch it, Joseph.
Why?
Because Jamie Lee gets her Norks out. Twice.
Well, I don't know. I'm not really into Clydesdales.
What's that?
You
I don't get that
insulting Jamie Lee Curtis.
Right.
I'm not.
I'm not standing for this either.
No, that's awful, and it's not true.
Yeah,
it is true.
Can I just give you, before we move on again, one interesting little tidbit I got from Alan Jones, the famous UK genre journalist. He in this magazine thing I have called Necrophile, I think it's from the late 90s, 1997, he says, he's talking about Friday the 13th, and he says, I adore the Friday the 13th series, but be prepared to gasp, though, apart from Part 2, which was the most pedantic carbon copy of the original. Yes.
I could never understand that. Why? Because they're all a carbon copy of each other, really.
Yeah, really. Exactly, yeah. I mean, if you're going to pick on one of the sequels, I mean, surely one of the later ones, but why Part 2? Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, really.
Very strange, but...
Yes.
That's for another episode.
Oh, yeah, and one last thing. This is the last thing. Does anyone else know of anyone called Anus? Because this is the first ever instant of ever encountered of somebody called Anus, who, of course, is the truck driver at the start of the film.
Oh, how did he spell it?
You sure it's not Enos?
It's when you put the subtitles on, it's spelled ANOS.
Oh. Wow. Thanks a lot, Mom.
Yeah, I know. Yes,
Campers like being jinxed is the least of his worries.
Exactly.
Yeah, it really does have a death curse.
I was going to say, do you remember last podcast I said I'd try and do some accents?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think I might have perfected the Irish one, and this is my attempt at being Erik.
Trolleyed, intoxicated, rat-arsed, langered, in a jock, in a hoop. One in Ireland.
What did you think?
I don't even understand what you said. I heard sort of banjacks. Is that what you said?
It was. It was all the different terms for being drunk in Ireland.
All right, very good. In a high-pitched voice. Is my voice really that?
Alvin! Alvin and the Chipmunks were there.
And I've done...
Well, you can't tease me about sounding Australian then.
No. Do you want to hear my impression of Nathan and Joseph?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, God. Bring it on.
He got a little pretty mouth, ain't he?
So there you go.
Wow.
That's not you.
All right, maybe it wasn't me.
We're never going to put that stereotype down.
No.
In the South, ever.
I know. Sorry, I was just talking about stereotyping, and I just thought I'd encourage a bit of that.
Do you guys know Dolly Parton?
Yeah, she's my neighbor.
Yeah, we hang out with her like every weekend. You know?
Well, without further ado, maybe we should move on to feedback, because I think this show's already going to be knocking 3 hours, I think. So who's got some feedback? Who wants to start? Joseph, what have you got for us?
Well, I got a few this week. This is from our good friend, Tosca Top Socks. A.K.A. Kevin from Birmingham, UK. He says, hey guys, hope all is good with you and the horrifically good world of the Hysteria continues. Great to hear that the first few podcasts of 2012 are keeping it up. The fantastically high standard, that is. The Sadist podcast was great, and the thought of a Xanadu Hour spinoff had me in stitches walking down the street. Although the Sadist as a slasher, even a proto-slasher, was a bit tenuous. Sorry. I just wanted to add my tuppence to the cell phone ruining the slasher debate. I have to agree. Throughout most modern slashers, I spend a lot of time thinking how they are going to get over the fact that everyone has a cell phone. Coverage is now pretty good, and there is no excuse not to make the call that will save your life. If I see one more movie with the immortal line, "Damn, I've got no signal," I will scream. My solution is to make it mandatory to have all future slasher films set in my favorite era, the 70s or the 80s. Goodbye to the cell phone and iPads, and hello to boys in satin shorts and girls called Muffy or Buffy with hot pink leg warmers and Farrah Fawcett hair. The naughties have a lot to offer, and we do live in times of great innovation, although it's sad to think whilst we will have some fantastic future slashers to look forward to, will we ever again reach the heady heights of the original Halloween, My Bloody Valentine, and Friday the 13th? Looking forward, though, I have very high hopes for ATM, and you're going to be disappointed there, and especially Cabin in the Woods, and hope that they live up to my expectations. Speak soon, guys. Tosca Top Socks.
Well, thank you, Tosca.
Yes, thank you, Tosca.
Yeah, it's always good to hear from a fellow traveller, friend of the show.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else have anything? I mean, I have a couple more, but anyone else got anything?
Nathan, have you got anything for us?
No.
No. It's like someone write to Nathan.
Yeah, someone write to Nathan. You got anything, Justin?
I've got one email, which is partly about the podcast. And it says, hey, Justin, I've written into the podcast before, and so has my partner in crime, Richard. We do the Hello, This is Doomed show podcast. As always, your podcast is incredible, one of a handful that I always look forward to. The reason for this email is to let you know that my wife bought me Teenage Wasteland for my birthday. I knew it'd be great, but it really blew me away. In fact, I was just as excited and surprised as I was when she brought me a Kindle a few years ago. What a beautifully put together book. It's just amazing with all the pictures and posters and the way it's laid out. I'm very excited to delve in and really delve in if I can get it out of my wife's hands. In fact, I drug out my Krimi collection and watched The College Girl Murders after reading your section on Krimis, which is the German kind of proto-slashers. I love the way you go through all the incarnations of the slasher. I know it's been out a while and I'm sure you received a lot of accolades, but I just wanted to congratulate you on such a fantastic book. It will occupy a very special place on my bookshelf. Thanks, Brad. And thank you, Brad. And also, he puts in a little plug for his podcast, and he said, P.S. We just put out an episode on the demon. Yep, that demon. And the URL for that, if I give the short URL, because it's quite a long URL, but it's www.cinemasomnambulist. I can't say that word. That's awful, isn't it? Somnambulist. Yes. .com. So I'm going to have to listen to that, Brad and Richard. So thank you for writing in. I'm sure it's going to be wonderful, and I'm just glad to know that there's other people out there giving love to obscure slasher movies. So that's great. So look forward to listening to that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Eric, have you got anything for us?
No. that was my impression of Nathan. No, yeah. I don't have any feedback. No.
Okay. What else have you got for us, Joseph?
I just got two more here. This is from Alex Dean. He writes, "Hey guys, snaps to you for being so good to your listening public. Love the minisode, and the Sadist episode with all four of you is great. I began watching The Sadist with a sense of duty, but ended up loving it. Edge of the seat stuff. Enjoyed your slasher memories and would love to hear Eric's sometime. Like Justin, my first horror cinema experience was Nightmare on Elm Street at 14. Also, I remember walking past a video shop on my way to school, which for months had as a window display, a life-size cutout of the guy munching on guts from Cannibal Holocaust. Finally watching Final Exam after finishing my last GCSE. Great memories. Anyhow, looking forward to the Friday the 13th episode. Can't think of anything funner. Alex Dean. P.S. Eric, I would love a Xanadu spinoff. As inspired an idea as reopening a roller disco, and you didn't even need a muse to come up with it. That's from Alex Dean.
Well, it sounds, Alex, you got Alex and other people saying that, Tosca saying that maybe you should do a little spin-off.
Xanadu podcast, just me talking to myself.
I'm sure Olivia Lee Newton-John would be up for that, and you could do a seance to get Gene Kelly. You could do lots of things.
Actually, the friend I'm going to see Adrienne King with in the Misty Moon Gallery is a huge fan of Xanadu and Olivia Newton-John, and apparently he's going to meet her 2 days before we meet Adrienne King, so he'll probably be a bit hyper.
Okay. Well, it's going to be,
he's going to have no interest in Adrienne King now. I think it's,
When he says meeting Olivia Newton-John, does he mean going for a coffee with her, or is he going to just...
a book signing in Waterstones in London.
Right, okay. Is he going to go on roller skates and hot pants?
He should actually. Michael Beck, who's in Xanadu and also in The Warriors, is it? He sold his roller skates that he wore in Xanadu on eBay recently, and they went for some ridiculous sum, like about $50,000.
Really? Wow.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Gosh. So you could try selling your underpants you're wearing today on eBay and see how much they go.
I could, yeah.
Wait, why don't you sell them after you made Adrian King? I shat these after I made Adrian King.
Ew.
What a lovely image
$50.
that is. Yeah.
$50.
$50. So if you would like any soiled underwear from any of us, then just write in.
I can't believe this is the lowest we've ever sunk.
Is it? I don't think it is. It's not the lowest,
prisoners, they get sent like soiled underwear all the time. Why can't we get stuff like that?
No, we don't want to be sent it. For God's sake.
We don't
sell it. No, we're selling it.
Tosca might send us some, skid marks. I don't know. We don't want to encourage people to do that, do we? So don't, Tosca. Please. I can see him reaching for a stamped addressed envelope. Without further ado, have we got anything else we want to discuss before it gets
I got one more here from a guy named David Helvering. He just says, "Are you familiar with the 2007 film Fraternity Massacre at Hell Island?" I'm not, but anyway, he says it's streaming on Netflix. I was watching it recently and started to recognize what I thought was the city of Memphis in the background. The distinctive light pattern on the bridge crossing the Mississippi River was clearly visible. Sure enough, as the film went along, you could definitely tell that the Hell Island in the title was actually Mud Island. As a former resident of Arkansas, it is nice to see a slasher being filmed so close to home. As for the film itself, it wasn't great, but it had a kind of style, campy humor, and plot turns that make it enjoyable to watch. It captured a lot of the essence in some of the more low-budget 80s efforts. I'd say the quality is somewhere around Bloody Movie or Evil Laugh. Anyway, since two of you live in Tennessee, not sure whether you are in East or West Tennessee, and we are in East Tennessee, maybe you guys could get a hold of the director and some of the cast for interviews. Many authentic Tennessee accents were on display throughout the film. Anyway, thanks for the podcast, David Hilvering.
No, well, thank you, David. Actually, talking of streaming films, did you catch the My Super Psycho Sweet 16 Part 3 on MTV
Not yet.
this week?
I still haven't seen the second one.
Sorry, Nathan?
I really want to see Part 3.
Okay, but it was because didn't it premiere on MTV in the States this week or last week?
A few days ago. Yeah. I still haven't seen Part 2, so I didn't catch it.
Okay. Well, we'll see if we can see that soon, because I don't think any of them have come out on DVD in this country. I've not seen them anywhere. Eric, have you?
No.
Just saw them through the magic of the internet.
Love that first film, though.
Yes, fantastic first film. Okay, well, I think with that we will wrap it up, and that was our Friday 13th episode. I hope you enjoyed it. As much as we enjoyed putting that together, and thank you again to the lovely Adrian King. If you can't make it along, and obviously if it's sold out now, you won't be able to make it along to the special screening, but as Erik said, make it along to the gallery showing of her work. And also, if you're in the States, why not sample some of her wines, which I'd love to sample, but on the wrong side of the world for that. So, but yes, well, thanks for listening, and we're going to play out with what is Erik? It's
Sail Away, Tiny Sparrow, which is the sort of country tinge song that plays in the diner at the start when Annie walks in looking for directions, and also it's playing when Sandy and Steve Christie are having a chat in a different diner later in the film. And it's also an embellished version of the music that plays at the end when Adrian King is in the boat waiting for help.
Okay, and just one last aside. Who was it who posted on Facebook that somebody's done an origami version of Sally?
Oh, that was me. Yeah, I found. There's you can get an origami version. What are they called again? There's some name for that type of thing where you can get. Anyway, you print it out and you can fold it up and make an origami version of Sandy, who's.
I think it's called origami.
Yes, I know, but they're foldables. They're called.
Foldables. Okay. But who would have thought to do that?
I don't know.
It's very strange, but it's
someone with a lot of time on their hands.
Yeah, and they even when you go into the page, it says something. There's a quote from her. It says $1.25, and that's all, or something like that. whatever her line is. Yeah.
Wow.
Fantastic. Well, until next time, thanks for listening, and we will be back for more Slash aplenty soon. So yeah, thanks for listening. See you soon. Take care.